Welcome. Welcome to the September 15th Newberg City Council. I call this meeting to order. Would everybody please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everybody, for coming. We've had an eventful week, so I chose to make a proclamation today. Whereas the First Amendment to the Constitution of the United States guarantees the freedom of speech, press, religion, assembly, and petition rights that form the foundation of our democracy. Whereas these freedoms are not abstract ideals, but living protections that empower every citizen to speak, worship, gather, and advocate without fear. Whereas the recent assassination of American political activist Charlie Kirk on September 10th, 2025, during a peaceful public event in Utah Valley University, stands as a tragic and unacceptable act of violence against the very freedoms the First Amendment protects. Whereas Mr. Kirk's death has sparked international mourning and debate, reminding us that violence must never be the answer to disagreement, and that every voice, whether we agree with it or not, deserves protection under the law. Now, therefore, I, Bill Rossacker, Mayor of the City of Newberg, Oregon, do hereby proclaim our unwavering support for the First Amendment and solemnly acknowledge the murder of Charlie Kirk as a grievous assault on free expression and civil society. We condemn political violence in all its forms. We affirm that the strength of our community lies in our ability to disagree without dehumanizing, to debate without destroying, and to uphold the dignity of every person's right to speak. Let this proclamation serve as both a tribute and a call to action. In Newberg, we will protect the freedoms that define us, honor those who have lost their lives in their defense, and foster a culture where ideas are met with dialogue, not violence. Thank you. You get to follow that, Will.
Can we do roll call before we move on?
I'm sorry, we need a roll call, don't we?
That's okay. I need my moment to speak. Come on. Councillor McBride.
Here.
Councillor Wheatley. Here. Councillor Yarnell Holloman. Here. Councillor Kilberg. Here. Mayor Rosacker.
Here.
Councillor Turgeson. Here. And Councillor Carmen.
I'm here.
Hey, Derek. Will, now it's your turn.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for those very well said words. Here is the City Manager's report for the events from August. Community development, there is so much going on right now. Short-term rental ordinance was passed. There was economic opportunities analysis was completed. The GFU Cinematic Arts Building is opening this month. The street policy discussion is coming before us again, as you know. And the Springbrook Meadows at Crestview, north of Jewelry, west of Crestview, is being finished. And work is continuing on criteria for formal solicitation for the one-time urban growth boundary expansion as desired by council. So much construction, one might refer to it as a construction boom. Apartment buildings going in. The TVF&R temporary new station 20 design is being submitted to the city. Nagomi at Springbrook has submitted a public improvement for their 100 lot subdivision. Kalina phase 1 will get final plat approval in September, and phase 2 is likely not far behind. So we're going to be seeing a great many other houses and other structures built in our wonderful town. Community engagement. In the month of August, the community engagement team worked with Public Works and Engineering, spreading the word about many wonderful initiatives, including road improvements in the targeted southern area of downtown of Newberg, which the council goal is to fix streets in that area. And we're doing a lot more again next year. Sewer smoke testing, which discovered several cross connections which need to be fixed between the sewer line and other infrastructure. Water Quality Month, highlighting our water quality report. Also, there was a State of the City video which received over 200 views on YouTube. If you want to know about all of the administrative reforms that have happened in the last few years with the city internally, please do watch that video. So many people have worked so hard to get the city modernized. It's well worth looking at. Clips were pulled from the full video highlighting different topics. It was done that way by design. Traffic safety reminders were pushed for the start of the school year, and also our police officers were on station at all of the schools to make sure that we had a good, safe start to school, reminding drivers and others to be safe. And today, the trial for the East Illinois street closure began, and we're going to see if that affordable approach solves the problem, or if it doesn't. And if it doesn't solve the problem, we'll remove the bollards. NDPD events and the National Night Out event in Memorial Park was a huge success. We had more citizens attend than before. Safety Town was great as usual. And we rolled out our new e-ticketing program to automate many steps in correcting poor driving behavior. That connects directly to our digital court system, one of the many reforms that you'll see if you watch the video. And here's a picture from National Night Out. And kids do love to smash old cars with hammers and sledgehammers. We've discovered that for sure. And look at that pooch. I'm not sure that that young lady is going to get that rope out of that dog's jaws. City Recorder, we received $430,800 in grant funding for the programmable logic controller replacement. That represents slightly over 40% of the funding necessary to upgrade our infrastructure that runs all of the electronic equipment at the sewage plant. That was well overdue for a replacement. The money really helped. Now those funds are freed up for our next thing in wastewater. Finance Records Control Project was launched, finalized our records policy, working on outdated code. Some of that outdated code is before us tonight, and we are getting within 1 year of being a completely digital organization, meaning that we will have finished scanning the literal hundreds and hundreds of boxes that were unscanned 4 years ago. So, woohoo. City Recorder led tours of the sister city delegation from Osago City, proceeding with the FEMA Disaster Recovery Grant for City Hall building repairs and mitigation. We've heard early word that this has been successful, with our grant writer doing some fantastic work, and we're going to be getting money for the roof to have real R value, and also for some of our windows to be replaced so as to reduce the chance of a future flood. On the 29th, Rachel celebrated 2 years with the city, making her eligible to apply for the Certified Municipal Clerk. Woot. Next up for Rachel is a master's degree in public administration, I would hope. Exactly. Capital engineering, the groundwater treatment plant filter color covers project. Pre-construction meeting was held on July 29th. Cedar Mill construction was the winner. They are leaning into construction right now. The project is expected to be finished before the end of this year. That is the only project amongst the last 5 capital improvement projects which is over budget. It is over budget by 200,000. Net, we are $700,000 under budget across all of the other projects, and they're all on time. We've submitted approval for structural fabrication and delivery. We are feeling it's going to be finished by next year. More things, road improvements, all major phases of our 7 road sections for this year are complete. Several hundreds of thousands of dollars under the estimated budget price because we drive a very tough deal with these guys. They have to bid. We argue with them on every little thing and we get the best price we can from companies like Eagle Elsner and Doolittle. Mountain View has been 100% crack sealed, setting the stage for next year's slurry seal when we can slurry seal the whole thing, and then it will be good for the next 7 or 8 years. South, centre and adjacent blocks have been milled. Meadow was milled. East Fulton has been completed with grind and inlay repairs and 1 soft spot full depth repair. Cape and slurry sealing has been completed, and boy, do I love the smell of asphalt. River Street, a pre-design scoping meeting has happened on August the 7th, and in fact, there's been another update since then. I and many departments, including Scott from Planning and Building and Keller Engineering, carefully walked River Street. We took note of any ambiguities and strangenesses that we saw. Next geotechnical exploration will be occurring, including ground penetrating radar to make sure we know where all the locates are. That is going to be rolling forward soon. Smoke testing will identify sources of groundwater infiltration, etc. Mentioned that already. We did a bunch of smoke testing and we found some things we need to fix. HR news. HR collaborated with NDPD's K9 officer to put on the 4th Lunch and Learn, showing how our dogs work, how they're trained, called Who Let the Dogs Out, and showing the incredible discipline of the K9s. If only all people were as disciplined as those poochies. There was a refresh on safety training, records and planning. There were multiple recruitments run, and in the hires department, Crystal, our part-time office assistant, was added to the building division to make up for retirements and other losses that we had seen. In IT, perhaps IT was going at an overly ambitious pace lately, but tremendous things have been achieved. The network upgrades were completed, including new firewalls and reconfiguration. We are currently practicing with a new virtual desktop called the Azure model, ironing out any kinks. I'm one of the people in the test group, so we're trying to shake it up, see what we can break. And we moved all of our email into a cloud repository. All of it. Millions of items. Done. In library land, summer reading finished with 2,109 participants. 1,367 received a free book to keep thanks to the Ready to Read program. 3,966 mascot fines, which means parents coming to local businesses, an added bonus for our economy. And our first ever teen service club where kids got to help 6th through 12th graders, helping folks sign up for summer reading and learning some good skills along the way. Wow, look at that. Library repair work. You may have seen the long-awaited ramp has been going well at the library. The guy that won the contract for that with Concrete Solutions said if he'd realized how complicated it was, he would have bid us a higher number. But with that said, the ramp is now going to be a more level surface without the slippery bricks that have caused slips and falls in previous winters. Inside the library, during that 1-week closure, staff, maintenance department staff and contractors did a whole bunch of minor repairs, some paint touch-ups, recarpeting, and a refresh of the AV equipment in the library, just like this equipment in here has also just been refreshed, which is why we can all hear each other better now. Public Works Emergency Management, we've been scheduling our mandated FEMA trainings in the 300 and 400 cycle for the fall of 2025. ICS, that's The Emergency Command Centre training is no cost to the city. City staff and volunteers have the priority, and then local partners if there are room. If you're in an organisation that's interested in getting some FEMA training, reach out to us, and if there are boat spaces, we'll get you on the list. We're also looking at a new alert platform. The Genesis alert platform will allow us to change our escape routes from town and create zones that correspond to our major avenues of escape in the event of a chemical spill or an earthquake or whatever it might be. So we're going to be rolling that out soon, and lots of department heads are getting training on the platform. Training links will be provided to all of those agencies as well. And we're inviting CPRD and PCC and the school district to all be involved in that platform. So everyone is talking about the same escape routes when they're talking about escape. Oh. Mr. Mayor, did you have a question?
What would ICS stand for?
Incident Command Centre Training. Public Works Safety Programme, heat reminders were pushed from the Safety Committee to staff. Questions were covered on personal protective equipment, heat training, fire escapes. An alternative schedule for extinguishers was written. Compiled PPE inventory of all equipment, and this will be shared into our SharePoint system. And safety training delivery survey was done with all departments submitting recommendations for additional safety training. There is a lot this month. We also replaced a leaking 2,750-gallon sodium hypochlorite tank, completed all of those different maintenance items, did clarifier inspections. That's part of cleaning the water that comes out of the wastewater system. Here are pictures of the tank. And here is a whole list of items done at the water plant and connected to the water system. And as you know, we have just started to routinely have to make 4 million gallons a day through the summer. The plant can only make 5.5 million gallons a day. Something to keep in mind. Filter media had to be replaced at the water plant. And here are some of the many, many activities that our maintenance division does all the time. So when you see my statistics report next month, when I talk about jobs completed, these are the types of jobs that we're talking about. Flushing hydrants, cleaning out culverts, and all the rest. Here are a couple of recent repairs. 2-inch meter at George Fox and a water meter at 2700 Portland Road at the Chevrolet dealership. Service meter at Villa Road and a meter curb stop at 2404 North Hoskins Street. And we also had a water main break, which does happen from time to time, but we really jumped on it, and I think we got that fixed. How many hours was that one, Russ?
They got it completely shut down and repaired in about 2.5 hours.
2.5 hours. Try Beaverton, see how long it takes there. Repaired a fire hydrant damaged by a truck in North Meridian and Hancock. Installed no parking signs in yellow curb sections in Mountain View near the middle school and Newberg High School. So that is it for a smashing August. What a fun fund of asphalt it has been. And as you'll see, residents' tax dollars are always hard at work here as usual. Are there any questions? Try to come up with new jokes. It's hard. I've been doing this for 4 years now. It's hard to come up with new gags.
Thank you, Will. If there are no questions, it's time for public comments. The first one we have is from Ann Mildenberger. Hi, Ann. I'm sure you know, but press the red button there when you're ready to speak.
Can you hear me? Good evening, Mr. Mayor, councilmen and councilwomen. First, I want to thank the mayor for his kind words at the dedication of the 2 Newberg Habitat homes a few weeks ago. It was inspiring to all those who were in attendance and especially to me. So thank you, Mayor. And I'm going to thank you all for your time this evening. I know that you have a busy agenda, so I'll be brief. A lot of my comments have to do with the declaration of the mayor this evening. I come to you, who are the elected representatives of the city of Newberg, to express my concerns that once again, growing in our community as a whole is a lot of difficult conversations. I'm fortunate to have lived in this town for most of my 77 years. I grew up down on 5th Street, the eldest of 10 children. I have raised 4 children, have 4 grandchildren and a great-grandson that have grown up here in Newberg. All my children, most of my nieces and nephews, and our extended family have graduated or are currently enrolled in Newberg schools. In fact, if we left Newberg, there would be a lot of extra space and a lot less traffic. Our mom and dad always instilled in us a pride for our little burg. Although we had limited financial income, we were happy thanks to Mr. Gaynor, who ran a small store on 1st Street and a meat counter in the back. He allowed my parents to purchase and pay the monthly food bill at the end of the month. When the bill was paid, we also got a bag of candy. Mr. Gaynor's kindness was our introduction to living and giving. As children, we learned to stand up and be proud, to treat others as we wanted to be treated. Now those days seem to be gone. There is no Mr. Gaynor and no business to teach kindness or help any longer, is there? Until about 6 years ago, this was a friendly community. I had felt safe to approach my neighbor and ask them to tell me their story. But now I wonder, what if they don't agree with me? What if they're on the other side? In February of this year, I felt alone and a need to express my First Amendment rights. I reached out and with the help of Sonda Martin, started the protest at the flagpole here in Newberg. With Sonda's vision of starting a mutual aid and assistance program, we have a food donation box for Newberg Fish at every demonstration. We encourage those who join us to practice peace and to send a message that we are there to support our Constitution and the understanding we are all created equal and we are all in this together. My wish is making Newberg our safe place and always our home. I tell those who are younger than me, which is almost everyone, I won't be here much longer, but you will inherit what I leave behind. I do not want to leave my family a place of fear and uncertainty, but a place of safety and hope. I don't want to stand on that corner and worry about somebody shooting us or running us over with their big truck. I support you as our elected leaders, and I know you have a tough job. I trust you will not only follow your heart, but that your constituents will see you as hope fulfilled. I also understand that some of you live in fear of those who disagree with your decisions and may even threaten your own lives. This must stop. I ask you, Mr. Mayor, and the council to institute safety protocols without fringing on free speech suppression in our little piece of Oregon. If you can't feel safe, then we cannot either. The tragic incidents of this past week have shocked our country, and we cannot let it affect Newberg. Finally, on Sunday, as you might know, there is a Peace Fest at the Cultural Center to dedicate the Peace Pole and a short peace walk after. A celebration of peace at an important time in not only our country, but in our little burg. I urge each of you to be there with your name tag and your district number to stand beside us as we walk in peace. You represent us. We put our trust and the trust of our extended families and friends in your hands, and you deserve to feel as safe as we do. There's a song that goes, "Let there be peace on earth and let it begin with me." But I say, let there be peace in Newberg and let it begin with you and me. Again, I thank you on behalf of myself, my kids, my grandkids, and especially my little great-grandson for your service and your commitment to our community. and I hope I will see you on Sunday. Thank you.
Sonda Martin, you get to follow that. Welcome. Good to see you.
Hello again, counselors, mayor. It's getting to be a habit. Unless one's living under a rock, completely cut off from the modern world, in which we're all here, so I'm guessing we're not, it's increasingly obvious that we are living in frightening times. The representative democracy that we have all grown up under and taken for granted is under attack from a small group of people who would take all the power for themselves and leave the rest of us, the 99% who aren't billionaires, to fight amongst ourselves for the increasingly scarce scraps. Fascism, that thing that our parents, grandparents, and/or great-grandparents fought against in the First and Second World War, has come to the United States, and it was voted in. We are seeing attacks on our constitutional freedoms by our own government, our First Amendment right of freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom to assemble peacefully and seek redress of our grievances, our Fourth Amendment right to be free from unreasonable search and seizure. We're seeing an economy wrecked for everyone but billionaires who continue to see their wealth grow. We're seeing our government, who is supposed to be for the people, actively dismantle or do away with the social safety net and all of the protections that the people count on to keep us safe and healthy, like vaccines, access to health care, low-income support, food safety regulations, clean water and air protections, etc. Seniors, the disabled, children, homeless, and the working poor are being left behind. We are seeing government-sponsored human rights violations against citizens and non-citizens alike simply because of the color of their skin, their immigration status, their poverty, or their personal viewpoints. A Fox News host was on air this past week calling for the involuntary lethal injection killing of homeless people who wouldn't accept the help they were offered. Our country is actively aiding in the genocide of the Palestinian people with my tax dollars. Now you're rolling your eyes inside maybe so no one sees it because you don't see how my words apply to this city council, but be patient, I'm getting there. I come before you tonight as I did 6 months ago to ask you to recommit to your oath to uphold the Constitution of the United States and the laws of the state of Oregon, Yamhill County, and this city. To speak and protect the vulnerable in our community whose persons and rights are the first to be targeted in a fascist regime, the disabled, the LGBTQIA community, people of color, the homeless, the poor, the elderly, women and children. 6 months ago, I got no response, so I'm asking again. Please don't be a part of the problem. Don't choose to only represent those who look like you, think like you, live like you, or love like you. The last 8 months, and especially the last few days, have seen an increase in right-wing and government-sponsored or tolerated violence against those who would exercise their First Amendment rights to criticize the government or religious or political leaders. In local community Facebook forums, I have seen a meteoric rise in the past couple days alone of threats of violence against peaceful protesters and other liberals in our community. I am one of those protesters. These are some of those protesters. Regardless of how a person feels about our message or our right to stand and protest, I and my fellow protesters do not deserve to feel unsafe doing it. We don't deserve doxing or threats or intimidation. I'm very happy that you made a proclamation that speaks out against political violence and affirms the First Amendment right to speak, worship, and gather and protest. I am, however, disappointed that as this is being repeated across our nation, this one killing is being recognized and spurring a very late arriving and maybe too little affirmation of First Amendment rights. Did the city make a similar proclamation after Melissa Hortman and her husband and their dog were murdered by a man with a hit list of 70-something Democrats? Will I be doxxed and threatened for my criticism tonight? Judging by the local Facebook furor against leftists and our own US government's vice president words today on TV, I would bet I will. I'm sure I'll face consequences. Unfortunately, over the past few years, there's been an active campaign of threats, intimidation, and downright harassment against one or more of your own council members by local conservative and self-avowed Christian residents. How is that acceptable? How would any of you feel if it were you? It's wrong, it's evil, it's unacceptable. As a body, I've not seen or heard you openly denouncing this political terrorism, and for all I know, some of you may support it behind the scenes. If someone gets murdered at protest or for advocating for the most vulnerable in our community, and this city did nothing to actively work to prevent it, I will look back at this moment and I will hold you responsible at the ballot box. And I will make sure that everyone I can reach holds you responsible at the ballot box. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we have a presentation from Juliet's house. Welcome.
All right, good evening, council members. Good evening, Mr. Mayor. Thank you so much for having me here. My name is Coleman Crocker. I am here representing Juliet's House. We are a local child advocacy center and child abuse intervention center. I want to give a special thank you to Councilor Robin Wheatley, who helped us with some child abuse awareness campaigns back in April, Child Abuse Prevention Month, and suggested it might be a good idea to come here and share our message as well. So thank you again. I know I have limited time and I wish I had a cheerier subject to talk to you all about, but I think it's an important topic nonetheless. So I will try to go through what's usually a 90-minute workshop and presentation in a very short amount of time, and hopefully encourage you to come by and speak to Juliet's house about learning more information about what we can all do to prevent child abuse in our community. So just to give a quick overview of who Juliet's House is in our community, we are the local Child Advocacy Center and Child Abuse Intervention Center. There's a network of these across the state and the country that try to make our abuse response and prevention systems better so that we can help children and non-offending family members who have experience with abuse. So we do so through a couple different programs, starting with our clinical services team. We have a very talented team of clinicians and forensic interviewers that support families and children that come in after abuse has been reported and gone through the appropriate systems, usually ODHS or law enforcement. And they support them through what's called an assessment day, where a child and family members would come in to go through a forensic interview. We know it's a very traumatizing experience to experience abuse, but it can be equally re-traumatizing to have to continue to tell that story to others. And so we want to make sure that that story is well documented in one space that is child-centered and comforting. And we have our facility dog and very talented interviewers to go through that process and help make sure that that is something that is resistant to re-traumatization. And they will also go through again, very voluntary, but medical exam, just a wellness checkup for the kids, making sure that they are in good health. And they are supported through that entire process by the Family Support Services team. That's the team that makes sure they are given food and water and whatever else they need to be comforted. They help refer them to other resources in the community as needed. And one of those resources might be through the referring them to the Trauma Recovery Services team. That's the branch of Juliet's House that does a lot of different modalities of therapy. We have case managers and therapists there to meet anyone who has experienced these things where they are at. All of these services are available regardless of a family's ability to pay. We just think it's important to provide them with a road towards recovery after the fact. Then that takes us to the child abuse prevention team. That's the team that I am a part of that believes that child abuse at the end of the day is preventable. There's no case of child abuse that ever had to have happened. And there's something we can do as individuals through our relationships, through our organizations and our community at large to prevent abuse before it would happen. And anyone, whether you are a parent or a teacher working with kids day in and day out, or if you work at the local restaurant or hardware store, you have a role to play in creating a safe community for kids and families as well. So we work with everywhere from the pre-K audience in the child abuse prevention team through the K through 5 schools. And we have a teen educator working with middle and high school students. And then we have adult educators trying to focus on just letting people know that there are things that we can all be doing to prevent abuse. Because our fundamental belief is that every child has the right to be safe. And we're glad that you agree with that. And again, I hope that this encourages you to come in and be a part of that changing safe community for all of the kids and families in our area. Last year, in just the K through 5 range, we served 8,464 children that got prevention education. We serve all of Yamhill County and Polk County. We share a lot of our services with our sister organization in Salem, Liberty House. And while that's a very impressive number, the one that we really want to get up there is our adult education. Adults, we had less than 300 last year, and we know that there's so many more of us that care about keeping kids safe. And we know that not everyone is available to or able to financially contribute to Juliet's House, but we highly encourage people to take any of our free resources for prevention, because that helps us secure more funding down the road when we have outreach to what we know could be a much higher number of adults who are taking on our trainings and really living by that message that every child has the right to be safe and that there is something you can do to make that happen. I have a couple quick statistics that I just think are important to understand the issue before you can prevent it. It's important to realize how common this is. Unfortunately, this is a pretty conservative estimate here, as the 1 in 5 children will have experienced a form of abuse, either neglect, emotional abuse, physical abuse, or child sexual abuse before their 18th birthday. We also know that it's especially an underreported issue in rural communities, like a lot of the areas around Yamhill County. And so it's important that we recognize that this number, the number on the right, could be a lot higher. We think that that number on the left could get to 0, but it takes a lot of effort and commitment. And so we appreciate anything you can do to help support us in that effort to make that first number 0. We care because these things have real impacts on real people, our friends and our neighbors and families. Obviously, there's a physical impact in the case of physical abuse and in the case of child sexual abuse with infection and lifelong potential injury or infection. There's obviously a psychological impact after experiencing abuse. The ACEs study, Adverse Childhood Experiences study, has linked a lot of correlations to higher rates of suicide and drug addiction, feelings of being dehumanized and demoralized, higher rates of shame and guilt. And so we know that there's a very real interpersonal trauma associated with any form of abuse. It's also just a misconception that Juliet's House only sees victims of child sexual abuse. We very much see children who have experienced all of these forms, unfortunately. But this also then ends up having a larger social impact, because what does it tell a child if no one intervenes, or if they are not believed? If a child tries to disclose their abuse and they are not believed, it might tell the child that that is just normal. That's just the way the world works, unfortunately. It might reaffirm that behavior. We don't want people then going out and repeating that behavior. We believe that there are more people who care about preventing this than there are trying to harm people. I think that's obvious, but we want to make sure that it doesn't get stigmatized as much as it already is, because the more we pretend it doesn't happen and we are not willing to talk about it, it creates a much larger social impact where there are real people that are feeling the physical and psychological and social impacts on a daily basis. So another quick statistic is just to talk about who abuses children, because I think it's really unfortunate that all too often we put such a focus on stranger danger. That's really all I heard growing up in the school system, and only 7% of cases with any substantial evidence are perpetrated by strangers towards children. Much more likely they are abused by someone who they have a connection with. The vast majority are acquaintances, and about a third make up family members. And that can make it a lot harder to then continue to voice our concerns about it. It's a lot easier to blame something on strangers that you can't see. It's nameless and faceless than it is to have a real confrontation or a boundary conversation with our friends and family. But it's all the more important when you see the data. I also want to touch on the gendered side of who abuses children. 88% of these cases found that men were abusing children. Still 9% abusing were female, and the other 3% are unknown. I don't say any of this thing to put anyone in any sort of box, by the way. This is not a scare tactic. It's not to say that if you have a male acquaintance around your kids that they are an abuser by any means. It's also not to say that if a child comes to you to say that something scary or harmful happened from a female stranger, that they shouldn't be believed, because that's not how the numbers line up. Again, this is just to help us recognize that there are patterns to this, and we expect that everyone in here that's committing to being a safe adult for kids in our community recognizes these patterns and is willing to use them to be more vigilant and communicative about the issue. We also just want to recognize that there are some normal behaviors of kids, and it's important that we see these things not as scary, because it can be scary to realize that kids have a natural curiosity about the world in general, but at certain developmental stages about sex and their body parts and others' body parts. It's normal for kids to seek approval from peers and adults, and very much to have a reliance on adults from day one. And that can be scary, thinking about an abuser trying to exploit these natural behaviors in children. But I just want to reframe that to think about how much of tools these are in our tool belt as safe adults, to realize that it's okay if a kid has a natural curiosity, and to give them the appropriate approval when they're asking questions, or when they behave in a certain way to show approval or discipline in the right ways. And when they rely on you to follow through and actually make the report, or follow through by listening to them and believing them and helping them get into a safe situation. We know that there's a lot of different reasons why children might not come out and choose to disclose their abuse. It's likely that 60 to 65% of kids aren't expected to tell someone about their abusive situation. They rely on those adults to pick up on cues or things that they say. And there's a lot of different reasons why a child might not choose to disclose. This is just a short list of some. They might be fearful of repercussions, or they have that connection to the abuser, because most of them are not strangers. There's those really crippling feelings of guilt and shame associated with this, or they're told to keep it a secret, or they're manipulated in a certain way. A huge reason why we put such an emphasis on seeing so many kids each school year is because we want to make sure that we don't fall into that issue that they don't know it was wrong, or that they don't have the language. We want them to be able to identify something that's wrong or harmful, and then to be able to talk it up to a safe adult, and realize that there's also no blame or shame that they should have associated with it. We want to make sure that they feel like they can identify at least 2 safe adults, and we want them to come home and bring these bookmarks back to you and say, I choose you as my safe adult, so that you can then, as a safe adult, carry on that conversation in an easier way, so that we don't stigmatize it on either end. But just to put yourself in the shoes of a child who maybe has experienced something, and thinking about all the different reasons why it's hard to voice these things. We also know child abuse is underreported in a lot of areas, because unfortunately, a lot of adults that maybe do suspect child abuse don't end up following through with making that report, even if they have that gut instinct. A lot of this could be just because they have a personal belief that whatever happens behind others' closed doors is none of my business. Unfortunately, we know it does take full communities to create safe spaces for kids. Because of those relationships, it's hard to have those conversations with our acquaintances and our family members when they're crossing boundaries. Most often, the answer I hear about why someone might not report is because they are wondering, what if I'm wrong? What is that going to do to someone? Very valid concern, but I just hope that if you're weighing what would happen if I'm wrong versus what would happen if I'm right, I hope you realize how much of a difference you could be making if you are correct. And if you are right, by making that report, it's not like every case will end up removing a child out of a home immediately, but making that call could end up making a lifetime of difference for that child. And we can all think of probably organizations that have unfortunately swept things under the rug to avoid scandal or avoid bad PR. So we want to make sure that all organizations have policies, have codes of conduct in place that make sure that they keep kids safe, and that they actually follow through with making those reports. In the interest of time, I'll skip through this one, but I think it's important to think about what you would do or say if a child did come to you to talk about an abusive situation. In that moment, it's about remaining calm. It's about listening to them, documenting their exact words, and if you feel like there's anything negative, follow through with making the call. Just a couple reminders. My team on clinical services says I can't say it enough. You do not need proof to make a report. That's another big reason people don't follow through with making a report, is they don't feel like they have all of the exact information that's going to be necessary to make any progress. Most of the time when you make this call, a lot of things will just be documented, and that helps bolster a case if there are more and more of those calls. But we want people to be comfortable with making that call, knowing that there are protections legally for anyone making those calls in good faith. Remembering that you are the eyes and ears of the community, and most of the time you're not going to see a physical piece of evidence about abuse to a child. You are going to see behavioral signs, things that they will do or say, or complete changes in their behaviors, things that we want you to develop that rapport with, so that you can check in with them, and that they either do tell you, or that you can open that conversation up and get more information. Oops. I think we had more. There we go. Now, I know that's kind of bleak, but I just want to talk about the things that we can do to prevent abuse before it would happen. I think it's really important to start with when people have needs met, when they have access to food and shelter, when they have access to things like childcare and transportation. Communities that have easy access to those see rates of all sorts of interpersonal violence go way down, especially child abuse and domestic violence. So anything we can do to help families get their basic needs met, it's extremely helpful. Empowering not just our kids to be able to talk it up and understand these issues, but empowering your neighbors, empowering this council, empowering anyone in Newberg and the surrounding area to be willing to talk about it and destigmatize the conversation. To check in with your organizations, encourage feedback between all adults, especially parents and youth serving organizations, make sure they have the right policies in place. A thriving library and higher literacy and education go a long way in preventing child abuse in any community. Just being a safe role model yourself, learning what we are teaching kids in the school, and then using some of that same language to role model good behaviors in the home, in your organizations and communities. And then becoming more trauma informed, just understanding what traumatic events do to our brain, especially to children's brains, and how they process these things and how they might talk about them. That's extremely helpful. And just being more vigilant and communicative. If I had to give one thing, it's just becoming more comfortable talking about this as an issue, because it's so easy to pretend that it's not happening. But unfortunately, at Juliet's house, we know more than most that it very much is, even in these areas where I have unfortunately heard, hey, we're a close, tight-knit community. We all know each other. This just doesn't really happen here. We unfortunately are still seeing a lot of those kids, and we know that it is happening in those areas. So there's so much that can contribute to prevention. This is essentially saying the same thing, just bolstering the concrete supports for families, making sure that you show them ways to cope with daily stress and show resilience and show positive social connections, positive boundary setting. There's a lot we can do, and highly encourage anyone to spread the word about Juliet's House free services, these free prevention courses, so that you can learn a little bit more of these, practice these in real time, and make connections in your community that help create safe spaces. So that's all that I have for you today. I just want to say thank you for giving me a little bit of time to talk about this issue, for doing what we can, not just in April as Child Abuse Prevention Month, but throughout the entire year, because kids depend on us the entire year. So thank you for what you do to keep kids and families safe in our area. Yeah, absolutely. Any questions, or wrap it up? Yes,
Thank you for being here.
absolutely.
I first want to just say I'm so grateful to Juliet's house. And if I would have had something like Juliet's house as a kid, I maybe would have had better coping skills going into my teens. And that's my big question is have you thought, and I know I've also heard that you're experiencing pretty significant budget shortfall because of federal budget cuts. And so I'm curious, I don't think we think about the federal budget cuts impacting child abuse services, but it's very real. And I'm curious, what Juliet's house is planning to do to backstop that, because I think our systems in Oregon are very broken around child abuse, child protections, and DHS is a nightmare.
Yeah.
So that's my first question. And then my second is, what are we doing in this county? And it's not all on the backs of Juliet's house, but what are we doing in this county to have a conversation around teen girls and protecting teen girls from unwanted advances, basically? And I don't think that that's something that we talk about as child abuse, and it's very much child abuse.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's ramped up, and especially, I feel like it's been normalized. So is there any sort of campaign or conversation about that currently within your leadership team?
Yeah, thank you for those questions, and I'll do my best to answer what I can from my specific spot on the prevention team. So yes, you're right, very much so. Losing federal funding has been a huge blow to Juliet's house, and I'm happy to at least say that coming out of these last few months, our prevention team was unfortunately and unexpectedly furloughed for the whole team. So myself and the rest of our 6-person team there just got back. That was kind of our safety net, because the schools weren't operating, so we weren't in with our biggest demographic. And so that was something that they had to make a really tough decision and put all of us on a rolling furlough. So we only had one of us in the office at any time throughout the summer. That's why we had to reschedule this presentation a couple times. But it is something that we're very happy is now back, and we have the reserves now to get us through this next year. But we are very highly relying on some big name donors to come through for us, because we're afraid that funding is no longer as assured as it once was.
But as is every organization.
Yes.
So is there anything else that we're doing beyond private donors that eventually will not have funding to backstop all of our nonprofits throughout the county?
No, that's a really good question, and one that's a little bit bigger than my position there as far as the overall plan for Juliet's house. I know that right now, like I said, we have the reserves in place. We're trying to now figure out what we can do. Our development team is trying to pull out all the stops and trying to organize a lot of different community events. We're thinking about every public event we see. We're trying to think about how we can show up and try to earn some revenue stream just to keep our services going. But the big thing that I'll say on the prevention side is just the numbers, getting our numbers up to prove to the bigger foundations what impact we're having. So even if it's not contributing your own donations, which of course we really appreciate, but if it's just attending any of our free services and getting that number well above 300, because we know that there's more than 300 adults in our community that care about child abuse prevention. But if we got that number up nearly to what the actual number is, to show the effect we're having in our community and the connections we're building in the community, that's, I think, the thing that would prove to be fruitful in terms of keeping that program going financially. And then as far as addressing your second question too, I want to be respectful of time. I think the biggest thing is making sure that we have appropriate curriculum and evidence-based curriculum. So we're actually excited that at the end of this month, we got a fully scholarshiped prevention team curriculum that we're going to go down and get our whole team trained on in Eugene. It's called Love 146, Not a Number. So it specifically talks about child abuse and human trafficking at that 12 to 18 age range, but it also talks a lot about boundaries and consent. So we're excited that our biggest boost there is that we're about to have a brand new curriculum that we're excited to offer all of the middle and high schools and young adults, and the universities, I think, could even get something out of it in our area, but that's the biggest news there. So I appreciate you addressing that. Yeah. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much. I've had the opportunity to both witness a child that had to go through the whole process, and I want to say that Juliet's house is a wonderful resource for exactly the reasons that you stated earlier, that when a child's been traumatized, he or she must be traumatized again to explain to somebody. So I'm glad you have those beautiful dogs and wonderful people that can provide that service. It's unfortunately necessary. Next on our agenda is the Housing Authority of Yamhill County, and I could have sworn you guys changed your name, but yet here we are.
What did you say?
Did you not change your name?
Did I change my name?
No, Yamhill County Housing Authority.
Oh, well, yeah, I can explain.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor and City Council members. I think there we are. I'm with the Yamhill County Affordable Housing Corporation. We are the nonprofit side of the Housing Authority of Yamhill County. So that's how it leads together. Can everybody hear me okay? Thanks. Usually I'm too loud, so. But yeah, that's the affiliation there. Thank you on behalf of our corporation and Housing Authority for inviting us to give this short presentation and a little update on the community excise tax Newberg Housing Rehabilitation Program. And thank you, Mayor and City Council members. I'd also like to mention Jim Talt. I didn't see if Jim was here today, but he was pretty key. He was instrumental in helping me get on board and write the grant. And he's a good supporter of affordable housing in the county. We are the 501c3 organization formed for the purposes of promoting homeownership, housing rehabilitation, education, and resource assistance for low-income families living in Yamhill County. And tonight, again, I'll be specifically talking about the Newberg Housing Rehabilitation Grant Program. Please stop me with any questions you might have. I have a tendency to go on a little bit and get sidetracked. So the statistics for tonight, we have 9 projects have been completed so far. We began in February with getting March. We received the funds for our projects. And so far, we're about halfway through our 1-year plan, and we're $174 through of the project. I don't know how to get it to go to the next little piece of that. There we go. 14 families are in the process of, we're determining eligibility, which is a big part of what we do. 14 families, we have about that many left to serve, 13, 14 families, which each grant we're allowed to spend approximately $12,000 per family. That's a cap that we put on this grant just to be able to spread the money out a little bit. Fortunately, we also have another grant, the Oregon Healthy Homes Grant, that we can leverage funds from that grant and combine them with the Newberg Housing Rehabilitation Grant. And that's been a real blessing because, as you all well know, we can't get a lot done for $12,000. But if we add 5 or 7 or 8 to that, we can get some pretty neat projects done. Repair items, we do anything related to health, safety, structural, and accessibility issues. This can be darn near anything on a house. We really do a whole home assessment on each project before we ever commit any funds. And we try to select the items that are best for the particular family. Historically, our grant program was only available to owners of manufactured homes in a park. We have 2 different programs within the Yamhill County Affordable Housing Corporation. We have a loan program and a grant program. And historically, we did only grants to manufactured homes in a park. Well, with this one, we've been able to spread that money out to all kinds of different homes. As long as you're a homeowner in the city of Newberg, we can, and you're low income and you need some help, we can work on it. This picture is of Dina. She'd been on our wait list for a number of years. She had an active roof leak, and we went in and put a new roof and some gutters, did some dry rot repairs, and she's tickled. I mean, she's a great person and very deserving of the grant. Improved her home, and she's going to be able to live there for a long time. Andrea, another participant, this is a walk-in shower conversion. She didn't have much option for bathing, just a step over in tub shower combo. She'd fallen a couple of times in the last year and was struggling just to have a safe place to take a shower. Converting that to a step-in shower was a game changer for her. And she can go back to a normal routine and feel pretty darn safe going in there. Electrical repairs, it always surprises me how many people live with challenges with their electrical system. I'm no electrician, but seeing some of the things we see that can easily be fixed, it's been a real blessing to have this additional funds for the homeowners in Newberg. We make sure we put new smoke detectors and carbon monoxide alarms in each participant. Even if we visit them and they are not eligible for some reason, or we have to deny them for some reason, we still make sure that they have proper functioning smoke detectors and CO2 alarms. The breaker in this house happened to be faulty, and it would have been, the hall lights didn't work and one of the bathroom lights didn't work. And so they were kind of rummaging around in the dark sometimes, especially in the winter. Simple repair on this one brought it up to where they could have sufficient lighting. Windows is another big one. We've done a ton of windows so far this year. We have some other projects in line for windows. It helps not only reduce the power bills, and improves the comfort and security. Some of the families do not have air conditioning, and if they don't have reasonably sound windows or storm doors, it gets pretty tough to get some air through there. That's been very helpful. Ramps, porches, decks, repair and replacement. This is another big one. Accessibility is huge. The majority of our people are elderly or disabled. You don't have to be elderly or disabled to take part of our program, but it turns out that many of them are. And if you got a wonky, wobbly deck or porch, or you need a ramp, and you can't get in and out of your house, this has been a huge improvement for a number of our people. HVA system repair replacement. This particular participant, we did quite a big project on this. We fixed up the accessibility. You can't quite see the ramp behind the 102 there, but there's a big ramp that goes up there, and then stairs, storm door, a couple of windows. And her HVAC system is what we initially went in to try to solve. And it turned out to be pretty simple. And so we were able to do a bunch of other stuff for her at the same time. This is Pamela and her dog Buddy, who I got to know pretty well. Their plumbing was just horrible. Some of the older manufactured homes have polybutylene plumbing, which if it hasn't failed, it's about to. It's not a flawed pipe, it's a connector problem, but we totally repipe using PEX pipe and solve this problem. We also do hot water heaters and faucets and toilets and different things like that, but that was kind of a fun one. This is a big project. Siding is a big problem. As we all know in the Northwest, it gets wet, and if it doesn't get dried out, or if it gets a bad leak somewhere, it causes some pretty serious problems. This particular participant had a for-cause notice of termination, and we're going to be able to go in there and replace the siding in combination with the Oregon Healthy Homes grant program. This is a pretty big project. This one's going to be close to $25,000, but the 12 from the CET and then the remaining from the Oregon Healthy Homes will allow this family to stay in place and have a safe place to be. And I've said this before, I know some of you have been some of my other presentations. $10,000 or $20,000 to many of us might represent a used car or a nice family vacation. But to these families, this is a life-changing amount of money, literally a life-changing amount of money. I had a participant last month that had an issue with too much stuff, however you want to categorize it. And this grant just helped her go beyond seeing what she normally sees in her house. When I said I simply can't work on it because of accessibility, I can't get in there. The contractors can't get in there. And we can't say somebody's hoarding, that's like, it's not my realm of expertise. But I told her, if you can solve this problem, I can get you this money and we can replace your windows and fix your doors. And I gave her initially 60 days and then gave her an additional 30 days and was feeling like it wasn't going to happen. And she invited me over and I was amazed. It was like walking into a clean, nice place. And she just rallied the troops and said, let's get rid of it. And they took care of her, and we're now in the process of getting her all new windows and 2 new doors. And so it's a successful program, guys. I appreciate everybody who helped get us to this point. Any questions?
So how long is this program?
This is a 1-year
And that-
program.
Okay, so, but I mean, you just started it or it's been going on for 5 or?
Oh,
6
you mean
years?
the housing?
Yeah.
Yamhill County Affordable Housing
Doing
Corporation?
this for people.
Oh, yeah, it's been in existence for decades, literally. I picked up the torch when the last person left about, this is my 3rd year. working on it. But Darcy Reynolds ran it for years and years, and it's been highly successful. Anybody else?
I love this. It's amazing. Do you have any plans to expand the program in the coming years as people may need additional support? And what can we do to get involved and be supportive of your foundation?
Thank you for that question. Yes, we're getting to the point now. We were successful in getting this grant and 3 other grants and one kind of in the pipeline at this point. So we're actively doing 3 grants at this point. And so far it's kind of a one-man show with 3 people in the accounting team who helped me. And so clearly I need help. And so we are working on that. To expand the program personnel, because that's what it takes right now. With the uncertainty of funding streams, it's like on a little bit of a pause, but we're going to dive in. We're going to have to dive in, because if we don't use some of these funds in the time that we're allowed, it's going to go back. So.
Are you able to speak about what funding cuts you anticipate or you're planning for in 2026, 27?
Fortunately, the funding streams that we currently have are state or city. Okay. So, and a substantial amount of it is in the bank. So we have that. I think it's harder to pull it back than it is, once you spend it or once you get it, it's harder to pull back. But we're pretty solid for the next 3 years. That's what we're hoping is going to keep us going. The community development block grant seems to be a pretty well run program. And I think that will pick up towards the end of the 3rd year. That's what we're counting on.
Just so you know, the city has a grant writer on staff. So if you need any help with doing some extra lift on writing other grants, we will be very delighted to help you.
That's amazing. Thank you, Will.
Just so you know, mate.
That is the grind of the job right there in a nutshell, because that, yeah, well, for me, I mean, for some people, it's what they love. It's a tough one for me. I don't know how people love it, but okay, that's great. I may call you for some tips and assistance on that, because we will be back in the trenches in about 12 months. Yeah. Anybody else?
I have some questions. First of all, I know you've got a great deal more money than 101,000. Are you going to spend the rest of it in the next year, or how's
Yeah.
that working?
From the CET funds, we had, yes. So we are about halfway through our contract, our anticipated contract time. We started in March. We received the funds in March, so we're going to be done with the funds by the end of March next year. And I don't see any hold up on that.
One of the items on our agenda tonight, we're looking over a contract for another project that is scheduled to receive CET funds. So just for consistency, I'd like to ask you a couple of questions, and just yes or no answers are fine. One of the requirements of the CET funds is that the money that the project remain affordable for the next 60 years. How are you ensuring that, is there any way that you can ensure that people who are older than me are going to have affordable housing for the next 60 years?
That's a pretty loaded question, Mayor. And we went back and forth about that, I think, when the grant agreement was being drafted, because I was concerned about answering that in a completely candid, upfront way. The way we do it right now, the next few years, we're going to have education programs, and we're not requiring households or participants to attend those to help them understand how to maintain their place, because that's our biggest problem. These people can have the money. I see their checkbook, I see their bank accounts, and I can't coach them in that, but I can certainly help them to understand that if they just take a piece of that every month and set it aside, if there's not grant funds available, there's some way, to get to it.
The next The length of term, I'm sorry, excuse me just a minute.
Could you explain that again? Did you say, for the house to be put on the list, there's some education that they're not required to go through, but that is available? Did you say that?
Correct. Going forward, what we're going to offer to participants is education classes. We're going to have home inspectors or, people from municipalities come in and speak to people, homeowners who have participated in the past and help them understand how they can maintain their house and save for that rainy day. Financial advisors in our resource center, we have that option. So it's going to be folded in. It's not a requirement of the participant to attend, but it's a requirement of some of the funds that we've received. I promised to do that, and we're going to do that.
So the other question I had was, one of the other requirements is that the project that the money is used for remains available to that customer at less than 30% of their income. Do you verify that these projects are going to remain what is considered affordable and defined as costing the homeowner less than 30% of their income?
I'm not completely following the question. So the 30%, we don't charge anything for what we're doing. It's a grant.
Right. The grant requirement is that whatever project the money is used for has to be available to that customer for less than 30% of their monthly income. Do you have, I guess what I'm after is you have no way to verify that. You guys do not try to verify that they're spending less than 30% of their income on that house, correct?
Oh, okay. I'm getting to you. I'm picking up now. I didn't understand what you're saying. Yes, we do not look at we look at the affordability of what they spend.
That's fine.
Yeah.
This is not designed for you. This is things I'm thinking about for the next contract.
Right.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
No, I appreciate those questions.
Thank you very much. By the way, I believe that your project is wonderful.
Thank you.
This segment of the population, which I'm getting very, very close to in age, is vulnerable, and for reasons beyond their control.
Right.
They're stuck in that house, and I think it is wonderful that this council had the opportunity to give you guys the money to support these folks in their remaining years. So thank you.
I thank you. Thank you all.
Next, we move into our consent agenda. Would anybody like to make a motion?
Mr. Mayor, motion to approve the consent calendar?
Second. Sorry.
All right, we have it has been moved and seconded that we approve the consent agenda. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, nay. Thank you. Motion passes. I didn't hear what Derek said.
Yeah, let me check. Counselor
Yeah,
Carmen, what was your vote?
I was gonna say yes.
All right, thank you.
So continued business is the draft spark contract. And I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. No, that's consent agenda. 7.2, master fee schedule, date change.
That was on the consent.
Okay. Thank you.
That was part of the consent.
All right, so we are up to continued business. And this is our chance. I'm not sure, James, maybe you should let us know what it is that you're looking for from council on this.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, council. James Walker, City Attorney. At your June 2025 meeting, you provided my office with direction to proceed with preparing a grant agreement to Spark Newberg in an amount that was equal to remaining funds available in connection with the construction excise tax revenues collected by the city. In connection with that direction, we also received a request from council to look into and to provide some analysis on whether the anticipated use of the funds by Spark Newberg, which we understand to be use for the purposes of acquiring real property that would be used to develop units that individuals or families would stay in while participating in a program focused on home ownership that Spark has created, has formed. And so we took a look into that. We also prepared a template of the grant agreement for your consideration. And we're looking for, I guess there are a couple of areas that I want to comment on behalf of the city attorney's office, and they fall into two categories. The first category is the analysis on our understanding of the anticipated use and whether that is a permissible use based on the authority at play with respect to the CET funds. The second category is a request for feedback from council on some of the terms and conditions with respect to the grant. We got some direction, and I want to make sure that we're understanding that direction before we advance the grant agreement and engage in negotiations with the Spark Newberg team. So let me address the first category, and I'll be brief with my comments, but the headline is that we do believe that the anticipated use, our understanding of the use of those funds is defensible under the applicable laws at play here. I do want to kind of lay the landscape a little bit as far as what's in play. There are two categories of authority. There is, Mr. Mayor, yes.
If I might, and I'm trying to be careful as to what I say here because I'm representing the Spark board in some cases,
Sure.
which is 9 other people who have not had an opportunity to discuss this. But we have been given the opportunity to acquire a piece of land to build phase 1 on. Now that means that phase 1 might not be 10 units. It might be a few less. We'll see. The land is not as big as we would have hoped. But that does mean that we are not necessarily going to be using this money for the purchase of real estate. Most likely this money will be used for the design phase, and then some of whatever's left over will be used in the construction phase.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's helpful. Those are helpful additional facts on the use of the funds. I guess a few comments here. So, when we look at the applicable authority here, we're really dealing with two areas: state law, and we're dealing with the municipal code. Even though the construction excise tax was sunset, I believe in 2023, the terms of that sunset still require that those revenues be used in accordance with the requirements of the ordinance. High level view, when you look at the permitted uses of the funds, there's a need for the use to be a developer incentive as defined by the applicable authority and a affordable housing program. And I'm intentional about using the word "and," particularly in this context, because we're dealing with the remaining balance of the funds, which could be a combination of funds from both the commercial industrial collections and the residential collections that are permitted under the code. So the recommendation or advice from my office would be that when awarding it, it needs to check both boxes of being in a developer incentive and an affordable housing program. When it comes to a developer incentive and an affordable housing program, the applicable state statutes and the code provide examples, but those examples are not exhaustive lists. We saw the presentation today from YCHC. That program that's running now wasn't expressly called out in the list of affordable housing programs, but council still decided to grant those funds. And our opinion from my office is that that was still a defensible use of those funds. When we're looking at developer incentives, some of the common examples that get called out are items that would kind of subsidize some of the developer costs that are imposed by the municipality. So you think about like SDC waivers, you think about subsidies with respect to certain fees, if you will. Land acquisition is expressly called out under the municipal ordinance. Design fees or fees for design services is not expressly called out. So that would be pushing the boundaries, and I need to kind of look into that a little deeper, whether those costs can kind of qualify as developer incentive, but it's not expressly excluded by no means. When it comes to affordable housing programs, and I think, Mr. Mayor, maybe this is, I'm making an assumption here, but this may have been a bit of the conversation that was earlier during the meeting. When you're looking at affordable housing programs, some of the specific examples that are called out are assistance with avoiding foreclosure, down payment assistance, rent buy downs, items like that. It doesn't expressly call out the construction of affordable housing units in the list, but we have enough from the state law and also from kind of the what I call the language surrounding the description to feel comfortable that the construction of affordable housing can still fit within that affordable housing program definition. Now, here's where it gets interesting, and that is, what is the definition of affordable housing, right? And in looking at the state statute, there's some guidance provided that makes it clear that when we're talking about affordable housing, and our city ordinance backs this up, we're talking about two components when looking at rental housing in particular. And I'll call those the income component and the rent component. The income component is looking at the 80% that the individual or family that's renting the space is at or below 80% of median family income for the area, or MFI, as we refer to it. There is also a rent component to that analysis or that calculation, which is that the rent that is being charged or applied in the rental context would need to equal 30% of that 80% of MFI. So when you're looking at the rent for that the individual is paying, that needs to not exceed 30% of the 80% MFI that's being charged. It gets increasingly complex when trying to identify what is or what isn't rent, because not all programs are as straightforward as, oh, we're going to, have lessees that we sign, or we're going to have tenants that we bring in and we charge them rent, right? It could be something where the fees that are being charged aren't necessarily labeled, or technically aren't to rent the space, but are tied to other services, right? They could be tied to, and we see this in the affordable housing context all the time, right? So when looking at what constitutes affordable for a particular unit, part of the analysis is looking not only at what's charged for the space, but also the amenities or the other services that may be related to that space. So when you think about it in the context of a multifamily building, it's the rent, but it's also in making that affordability analysis, we typically see in challenges in other contexts, we typically see people look at, okay, well, it's not just rent, but what about utilities? Are they charging a fee for the use of the laundry facilities? Are they charging a fee for use of certain common areas or common spaces? That can be all included in the analysis of rent that is made to be affordable. And so if there are fees not necessarily tied to the leasing of the space, but are tied to other things that are kind of inextricably linked to the space, the most defensible position for the city would be to capture that or consider that in the inclusion of rent for determining whether there's affordability. So the other fees that may be charged in addition to the fees to occupy the space, we would recommend that that be included in your calculation of saying, is that at 30% of 80% to constitute an affordable unit? I'm going to pause right there and see if there are questions, because I know I threw a lot out there.
Just to make sure I understand this last part. So your recommendation is that the utilities and maybe the laundry facilities would be included in the rent, or is it the opposite?
Thank you, Councilor Kilberg. Yes, that's correct. So my recommendation, I do think that based on our understanding of the program, that it's defensible, but I think it aids the position of it being defensible if in looking at the fees that are charged to future individuals or families that are in the units, that we consider not just the cost of occupying the unit, but also any other fees that are tied to their use of the space.
So one of the things that I remember about the presentation with Spark that I think has also come up in subsequent conversations was, is it a full tenant landlord situation or kind of some other arrangement? And so I guess I'm curious kind of if it has to be rent under that definition of affordable housing, do you have a recommendation around like, should we encourage / require that it is a full tenant landlord arrangement so that individuals have all of those protections underneath that to be in compliance with affordable housing? Or is, and I don't want to misrepresent how it was framed, but kind of this other arrangement around fees acceptable in your opinion?
Thank you, Councilor Turgeson. So I think because of the city's role here as the provider of the grant, I want to be very tailored in the role we play in the position that we take with respect to the operation of any sort of residence or housing. So I think that it's important to make sure that in the calculation that the fees are hitting that 30% of 80%. But in terms of requiring the Spark Newberg to comply with landlord tenant law, I would actually encourage the city not to take a position on that and allow Spark Newberg to make their own determination as the owner of the program and the site.
So is this a good time to take a break?
I have questions, but if you want to wait, I can wait.
Okay, go ahead, ask your question.
Oh, so the 30% of the 80% AMI, that number calculated for Newberg, all of the program fees, including, let's call it boarding, sure, instead of rent, all of the programmatic costs that would be as part of that. So I'm guessing there's education, financial counseling, all the things that were presented. All of that cost needs to still be 30% of the 80%. correct? Because that is not anywhere near the numbers that were presented for monthly costs.
Yeah, I think that that's the position that creates the most defensible position for the city, is if that is capturing that 30% of the 80%. Now, that's for participants in the program that are inhabiting and living in the units, right? I mean, if you have, in theory, if there's a participant that's not using the residential space, that's a different analysis, right? But when it comes to those that are living in the units and they're living on the property is tied to the participation in the program, that link is at least as presented to city attorney's office, very strong.
So I've got the same two questions that I asked the gentleman earlier today. There is no way for that program to determine the 30% rent. Does that change? And beyond that, the 60-year requirement for their program obviously can't get met because those mobile homes are not going to last that long, and they won't be affordable when they're not livable. So, and then the other, in our draft document, there is a requirement that if somebody decides to file a suit against the city for the disbursement of these funds, that you're requiring the participant to hold the city harmless. Is that clause in the other contracts that you've signed? There have been two other, well, probably three, the same entity twice and another entity. Do they have those same clauses in their contracts?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm gonna address those questions in reverse and then and let me know if I'm missing anything. So when it comes to the indemnification requirements in grant agreements, it is the city's practice to have indemnity agreements in all of its grant agreements. Now, whether the indemnity language is the same for every grant agreement, I'd have to go back and look and run a comparison to make sure, but we do tend to look for the grantee to provide some protection for the city if there's a use of grant funds that causes some sort of claim or exposure for the city. The second question on whether the 60-year restriction. So in the context of YCAHC's program, well, let me take a step back. So that 60-year restriction in the municipal code, that is, I know none of us were here when that was drafted, right? But it is a bit challenging to. Well, I should say that the draft, in terms of the drafters, the council who drafted it, okay. So when it comes to the application of it in the context of programs that I would label as creative, where they don't neatly fit within something that's expressly called out, it does become a bit challenging to see how it applies. I agree, Mr. Mayor. With respect to YCAHC, the 60-year requirement applies to the purchase or construction of affordable units, and one can take the position that with a narrow reading, right, that purchase or construction is distinct from repair, particularly repair of units that, they may not be, the arrangements are different with the different individuals who are being serviced there. Some may be renting, but some may have a mortgage and, own. And so the thought is that that's different because it's not a new construction. It's not a purchase of an existing unit. It's a repair of an existing unit. So we were able to find a distinction there. The 30% of 80 and how that kind of applies, or how one checks on that, that's a bit unique with YCAHC too, because if it's a rental arrangement, there's you could look into like the structure of the financing for the ownership of the unit, but even then, the city's giving a grant to repair it. They're not really providing financing for the actual ownership or rent of the improvement itself. So it's a bit of a distinct analysis because you're dealing, and that's why we felt, really comfortable in that instance saying it was defensible as well, is because it's really targeting the repair of an existing unit. It's not actually providing financing for the habitation, if you will, of a unit.
Go ahead.
So just to make sure I'm tracking, we're thinking that this is different because there is habitation of a unit, and in theory, these units will exist for 60+ years. So they have to be maintained at this 30% of the 80%. Did I track all that right?
It's a combination of factors, right? So there's the habitation piece, but the type of habitation, right? If we're talking about like temporary rental housing, there's the 30% of 80% that we see in other components of state law is easily translatable to a rental arrangement versus an ownership arrangement, or versus an arrangement where the role of the city is coming in as just a funder of a repair versus actually building or constructing the unit itself. If that makes sense.
Okay.
I guess what I would like to point out is it sounds like these things are negotiable. So I would hope that council would give Spark Newberg the opportunity to show you how we can comply with these various requirements before you make your decision. That being said, I'm going to take a short break here. I'm going to and when we come back, I'm going to stay out in the audience, and I'm going to turn the meeting over to the council president. You guys can deliberate on the rest of this without my opinions. And there are two members of the Spark board here. If you have any questions for them, they would make themselves available to answer. So I'm going to go ahead and adjourn for a recess, about 5 minutes.
Okay, I'll call the meeting back to order, 7:43. And now we will move into council deliberations on the topic of the review of draft CET grant contract for Spark Newberg. So I'll open it up to deliberation from council members. But first from James.
Oh, just Madam President, I know council has a lot to deliberate on. I do have a couple of items that I would value some input from council on when the time permits, with respect to the grant agreement, particularly around kind of timelines and things like that. So I'll present those particular questions maybe a little later after there's been a chance to deliberate.
Councilor Kilby.
I just want to clarify, this contract that we saw this week has not yet been seen by Spark, or they haven't responded with any suggestions or anything?
That's correct. It has not been presented to Spark yet. This is just presented to council.
Based on that, I had a similar thought when I was before the meeting. I do want to recommend that we consider as council, and I'm sure this is the hope, but that we do give Spark Newberg the time to come back to thoughtfully look through what we're talking about and see if they feel comfortable meeting the requirements that have been passed forward by legal. We shouldn't expect them to have to do that tonight. Councilor Ferguson.
I think for me, one of the things that would feel really helpful that I would love to have Spark come back is when we were doing our initial conversation, I felt like they had a great skeleton budget, but it felt like there was a lot of pieces around like operational costs, those total financials that I'm now curious kind of with this like updated on the 30% of the 80%. I think my memory, I tried to pull up, I couldn't find it earlier today. I tried to pull up that past presentation. I think an updated budget and where they're at with the 30% of the 80% with the fees would be really helpful. I think just as part of this whole piece.
So based on, where we're at, I would love to hear James' questions with regard to recommendations from us. I don't know what else we could do tonight.
Lead us through the questions for clarification that could help you and your office with the next steps that you mentioned.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to do that. And I think, as I'm walking through these, some of these may be questions where we're not necessarily looking for an answer on the spot right now. Council may want an opportunity to let it marinate a bit, or, of course, I know there's some questions that Spark's going to respond to. And so being able to take in all that information, I completely appreciate that. But I think it's important to kind of toss these out there for council to consider. I'd put these questions in the kind of four categories, or there's four really questions here. The first is related to timeline. So during the June meeting, council did make it very clear to my office that one of the preconditions to the grant was Spark Newberg achieving federally recognized tax exempt status under Section 501c3 of the Internal Revenue Code, so 501c3 status. That is included in the agreement that was included in the agenda. I appreciate that Spark hasn't had a chance to see that full agreement because we're still looking for that input from council. But if there are timelines that council has in mind as far as when to achieve that status, we would want that direction from the council.
I think that I brought that up, and I think that at least open for conversation with the council is that they would need to achieve their nonprofit status and expend the funds within the timeline that is required of the CET funds. Is there a timeline of when they have to expend the funds that we're releasing to them? There's no timeline.
There isn't a fixed timeline in the current agreement. We have in the agreement that's posted on the agenda a 3-year timeline as far as termination of the agreement. So there's a window there, but that's a placeholder. If council wants something different, longer or shorter, we can make that adjustment.
Anyone have any thoughts on that? I would be comfortable, and I think it's reasonable. I think they'll get their nonprofit status, and I think you have it. Check. So I think that that's a moot point. And just within the contract terms of the 3 years, I think I would feel comfortable with knowing that it's a development project.
Oh.
So are we asking them to have expended all of the funding within 3 years, or I guess what are we at?
Yes.
Okay. That was one.
Madam President, I see that
Oh,
Counselor
I'm so
Carmen's raising
sorry.
hand.
Sorry, Counselor Carmen. Sorry about that.
That's okay. I couldn't hear you guys very well. Did you say they are recognized by the IRS for tax exempt status?
Yes, they've achieved their nonprofit status, correct?
Okay.
Mhm. Okay.
So I think we're all in agreement, 3-year contract, expend the distributed funds by then.
And I gather that, okay, that's great. And that's a helpful development on the 501c3 status. So that not to get too far in the weeds, but that turns it into just a due diligence item for us getting a determination letter versus waiting for the actual achievement of that status. The second piece is there, and this is also related to timeline, are we looking for a timeline with respect to what we call site control? And I understand from the mayor's comments that there's a property that's already been identified. And so if the city is looking for some sort of timeline or term on having a purchase and sale agreement or I'm not sure of the structure of the ownership, ground lease or some sort of documentation showing that they have, not necessarily that they own the property already, because I think that would be a bit overreaching, but that they have the rights to acquire it. If that's something council wants within a certain period of time, we can update the grant agreement to reflect that.
Thoughts from council? Counselor McBride.
Well, in light of how long some projects are going or how long it is to get things put together and buying land, I'd say give them 12 months is what I would look at. Yeah, yeah, 12 months. I mean, anytime shorter than that, I think is just putting too much pressure, is unreasonable, and so I would go with 12 months.
How does the rest of the council feel with this? Okay. Counselor Kilberg, how do you feel?
Well, I want to make sure I understand the difference between they have to have all the money spent within 3 years, but within 12 months, they must have acquired the property on which to build the units.
Yeah, that's a great question, Councilor Kilberg, as far as the spending. Right now, what I'm hearing is that council's saying they want the funds to be spent within 3 years, but maybe what's on the table is site control within a year. Whether
Purchase
those two
agreement.
timelines.
A purchase agreement, correct? Not, we're not saying that they control the site. We're saying that there's a sale agreement.
That's right. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. So by site control, I mean evidence of site control, which is not, not fee ownership or actually having the what we call in property law, the bundle of sticks to hold the property rights, but just the agreement in place to acquire that. Whether those two timelines, the 3 years for the spending versus the year for the site control, need to be closer together, I think that's a question for council as far as what you'd like to see. I think it's an interesting development that some of the funds are being spent on construction and design and not necessarily exclusively on the acquisition. So what that leads me to think is that those timelines don't need to line up exactly. They don't need to be the same.
And I think we will hear when Spark Newberg comes back with the budget detail, their proposed usage of the funds, and we can then also work together to find a timeline that seems reasonable to both parties to achieve that, I think. Dr. Turks, or sorry, Counselor Turks.
So I guess I have a clarification question. So we've said 3 years to get all of the money spent. One of the things and I'm so sorry I couldn't find y'all's budget. I went back to look for it earlier today. I could not find it in the meeting. My memory is that the hope was that they would obtain more funding in addition to this funding. So what happens if they spend all of the money in 3 years, but the project hasn't launched because they're still working to acquire additional funding?
I will attempt that. I think we are saying that I think we're saying we're comfortable with the money being spent towards pre-construction costs is what I'm gathering here. Pre-construction and land acquisition costs without having the assurances of a fully funded project or program. I think that was what we approved when we first passed it. It would be helpful if there have been other funding sources acquired since they have come back for that to be included in the budget just to show viability of the project. I think would be helpful for all of us to make a final decision on this.
And then does that leave us with any liability if the project never comes to fruition?
Yeah, that's a good question, Councilor Turkison. So I think that the kind kind of linchpin, or the big question is whether the anticipated use qualifies under applicable code and statute. If the project doesn't come to fruition, I think but the purpose remains the same. There's no adjustment in that. Then it really kind of narrows what the claim would be. It's hard for me to envision. I don't want to give too many ideas for someone that may challenge it in a public meeting, but what the claim would be is tough to envision, because what the city granted under its grant agreement at the outset was for a given use. That it didn't materialize isn't really a liability for the city. And also there's a question of what would the remedy of that plaintiff be, right? If the project fails. So I think it's a tough road for a plaintiff under that hypothetical. Yes.
Yeah.
So under that, I noticed one of the things, I didn't see like a dissolution clause in the contract. And so I guess I was curious. So you said it's fine as long as the intent remains the same. What happens if there's a transition in leadership and this 501c3 ultimately dissolves and no longer exists? Is there like a payback requirement? What becomes of said building land that has been, what if they sell it to a developer who wants to use it as like multi-million-dollar condos or something?
Yeah, I mean, that is a real risk, right? That, because I assume under this hypothetical, Councilor Jurgensen, that the money it's gone, it's been spent, right? Yeah, I mean, that is a risk where the city, if the 501c3 dissolves and the money's been spent and the property's been transferred to some third party that's going to build the condos, there aren't a lot of remedies there. You know, as your legal counsel, I'm a lawyer, I'm not a magician, so I can't create, that would be a tough position.
City manager.
I would opine, however, that in many occasions we have given grants to people like Lutheran Charities, for example, with the full assumption that the property would be built for the benefit of kids in that case. And so there's always a risk.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I think though that there's also been a precedent in asking organizations to pay back funding, right? When they have learned that they've not been able or will not be able to fulfill an intended use. So I guess I was just curious about that. If that has historically been a precedent, is that something we should consider as part of this contract?
Well, it's state and federal grant precedent.
Well, and
So I think that I think what I'm hearing and would be helpful from Spark Newberg is to include a contingency plan in the situation that the program doesn't, which I believe it will, but doesn't reach fruition. And also, what is your handoff plan for if your nonprofit is no longer the nonprofit organization operating the space to be in the spirit of the 60-year affordable housing requirement? So are you going to pass that to another nonprofit? Just some sort of contingency plan, reassurance, so that we have that level of safeguard, because while there may not be a legal risk, I think there is just precedent setting and also being good stewards of developer dollars, frankly. Do people feel comfortable? Yes.
Yeah, I don't know if I agree with that. Only to the extent that I don't think you can put any type of a guarantee. What about the money that we gave to Habitat? What happens if somebody within that organization steals a bunch of money? And it goes under. I mean, there are risks and things that happen. And so I don't want us to get to the point where we are putting undue encumbrances on the organization when we wouldn't do that to Habitat or somebody else that we helped out. I understand you want to be cautious, and I want to be cautious too, but there's a point where I think we just put too much red tape out there. And I mean, I just would not want to go down that road.
The one difference I will say, and I say this with admiration, respect for everyone on the Spark Newberg board. This is pretty unprecedented to hand over a $700,000 check to a nonprofit that just met nonprofit status. And the level of scrutiny that other nonprofits have gone through to receive $25,000 from this council, the bar has been far higher than it is right now. And I think that is from a place of, and I do support it from a place of trust and respect of the people that are coming forward to us and knowing what they've been a part of within this community for decades to build what Newberg is. So I have all the trust in the world that it will get off the ground. It will be an amazing program. But I do think that it's important and imperative that we don't hand over $700,000 to a brand new nonprofit without the reassurances of accountability and good stewardship of our money.
I acknowledge they're very, very new, brand new, and Habitat's been around for a while, but you do learn of things where there's embezzlement or whatever. So we, by our vote of approving this, the funding for Spark Newberg, I think that's enough. We approved it. I think with that approval, I certainly expect them to achieve the results that they're working toward. So I don't think it's necessary to add these other little caveats that for them specifically to that
They
haven't
do need
been
to
added
demonstrate that they
other-
meet that they're in compliance with the grant requirements. They
Yeah,
do need
yeah,
to
yeah.
demonstrate
Yeah,
that.
that's for sure. All of them have had to do that. So I'm just saying, well, what if they are, go under in 5 years or 10 years or
But we
whatever? I
have
don't thi-
actually recently placed requirements on the grants that we've extended to be able to provide outcome data and come back and show to show, what is the word I'm looking for? Longevity, I don't know. I'm spacing on the word, but I don't feel comfortable at all giving over $700,000 without some sort of paragraph of what you're going to do if you want to transition. And I'm saying that from a place of running a nonprofit for 8 years that is extremely grueling and tiring. And there's grants requirements with the state and federal government are huge hurdles. So I don't feel comfortable handing over a check without some of those similar guardrails. I would feel very uncomfortable without some sort of accountability of the funds.
You, just a few minutes ago before I ask, you talked about include a paragraph to us. That seems reasonable. Yeah.
I don't want
By-
any
by
red
Spark.
tape of like ongoing reporting. I don't need that. I just want part of the proposal. Here's how we're going to meet it and our commitment. Counselor Carmen, yell at me next time.
Yeah, I agree with all those guardrail things. I think that we should be looking to the future, especially in light of what James said. Yeah, there's a risk and we should be trying to mitigate risk. This is a lot of money. And for a new program that, I'm not very comfortable with, I wasn't there to vote. So I think all these things should be in place.
Great. Back to City Attorney Walker. Do you have any other questions that would be helpful for next draft iteration of the contract?
Just a couple more, President Yarno Holloman. So I'm assuming from this discussion that the structure of the funding is a payment upon satisfaction of the conditions in the grant agreement, not a reimbursement structure where the Spark Newberg entity would have to incur the cost first and then receive payment from the city. So I'm assuming we're not talking about a reimbursement agreement. We're talking about just granting the funds upon the satisfaction. Okay, excellent. And then this was touched on a little bit earlier, but as far as the duration of any sort of affordability requirements, if you will, does council have some direction for my office with respect to how long you'd like affordability requirements to apply to this particular project.
Is the 60 years not applicable or?
This one is, I think that if we're comparing it to the like the YCHC project, this one's closer, right? As far as you're talking about the language in the ordinance dealt with the construction or purchase of affordable housing, and part of what the funds are going towards are construction and design, design. It's not a big leap to say that that's part of the construction process. So, so this one's closer. I think this is part of the challenge with the way that the old code was set up, quite frankly, because I will also say that, having a affordability restriction that's 60 years recorded against title for the property, from a deal standpoint, from a project development standpoint, does create some, I would imagine, some challenges to the extent there are other funders involved, lenders and others that may want to record interest against title. That's going to be tough to deal with the 60 unit, the 60-year affordability requirement if that's recorded by the city.
Councilor McBride?
So what's the downside, James, if we went with 30 years? If we just picked a lower number, what is the downside to doing that? If it makes it easier for maybe somebody to get grants or something like that?
Well, we do as the city, we've got the requirement that's in the code that still extends into this use of funds. So yeah, and
So
it does
we have to stick with the 60 years because it's in the code, or we would need to change the code language.
Yeah. Yes, the short answer is yes. I hesitate there, Councilor McBride, because we already sunset this code, but we expressly stated that the requirements in the sunset code would extend to those dollars. So it would be a bit of a dance to try to change it.
Hey,
So what I can do, at least at this point, because I know that this is a lot out on the plate for council, is we don't necessarily need to prepare a recordable instrument at this point. What we could do is put something in the grant agreement related to the duration, and have that be more of a contractual requirement that's being proposed at this point instead of a recorded instrument, and then bring that back with the other adjustments that I've gathered from council tonight to further consider. And then I also know that the council has asked Spark Newberg for some additional detail as far as budgeting and whatnot. And so we can work to bring all of that at the same
I think
time.
my preference would be that we do have the strictest requirement on that within the contract to start with, and then invite Spark Newberg to come and provide their feedback if it is a hindrance to their ability to secure funding. And if it is, and I think then we could have the conversation and negotiate that term of the contract. But if that is the precedent that is standard for whether it was YCAP or Affordable Housing Commission or Yamhill County, I do think that, if you're going to play ball, you got to play ball.
I'm seeing some head nodding. I don't necessarily need a vote to have to move forward, but if we're assuming there are no objections, I'm happy to have the full requirements of the sunset ordinance there on the 60 years and the recorded instrument, and then we can continue that conversation. Happy to set that up on the documentation side.
City manager.
It's remarkable that this sort of back and forth complex issue can be debated in an open session in council chamber. Well done, everybody.
Well, we're lucky. We have amazing people in this community. Yes.
I'm okay with us just moving forward with this, and then get it drawn up and then just have Sparks take a look at it and let's move forward and get going on this.
Did you have any final questions that you wanted to bring forward for direction?
No, Council President Yarno Holloman.
Okay, so then, Counselor Ferguson.
I think just a quick clarification, maybe for me. Can we just move forward with it or do we need them to clarify?
No, we're
their
coming back.
numbers?
We're coming back.
Okay.
Yeah, I think you mean move forward from now.
Right.
Yep,
Oh,
we've,
okay.
we've
Sorry.
had the conversation. So going forward at a future council meeting, we'll provide the opportunity to Spark Newberg to come present the budget, and then contingency planning for any sort of handoff that may need to happen, your thoughts and feelings on the 60-year requirement. And I think really specifically talking about the 30% of the 80th percentile AMI would be really helpful. But we're really grateful for you to be here tonight and for all of the work and investment that you've put in towards this project. And we look forward to having you back. I will turn over the reins now. We'll take a 2-minute break and come back at 8:13, and our mayor will come back to his seat.
Well, before we move on, I would like to say, this is a wonderful city council. You guys, what you just did is, as was brought up, a good example of democracy. By the way, I too, as mayor, would have been lobbying for some sort of accountability. So please don't feel like you're asking for something that's going to hurt our feelings, because I mean, it's only responsible. That is a chunk of money. It's only a tenth of what we need, but it's a chunk of money. And so thank you for being responsible. And thanks for handling that. And thank you, Elise. All right, now we have some public hearings. And the first one is going to be repealing of the outdated code sections on dancing, cigarette vending machines, and cable communications commission.
Oh, not that one.
I'm disappointed that you don't have some little kids in here to dance after you get rid of this.
I mean, I can make it happen. I've got a few. Ooh. Oh, Footloose, I think. Yeah, it's Footloose all the way. So yeah, we're here to talk about dancing, cigarettes, and cable television. Let's have fun with this tonight. So if you want to call it to order, and I'll do my staff report after that.
All right, I call this public hearing to order. And at this point, we're looking for declaration of conflicts of interest or abstentions. If any of you own a cigarette vending machine, you need to recuse yourself. Seeing none, the floor is yours.
All right. None of you are holding public dances all the time? Nothing? No, okay. All right. So thank you so much for letting me bring this fun one to you guys tonight. I'm just so you know, I'm going through all of the code with fine-tooth comb and finding things that we can polish up a little bit here. This one was very, very straightforward, and we've known for a while that it needed to be taken care of. So after our last discussion, I looked through it a little bit more. We already knew that the whole section on cigarette vending machines can go because OCLC takes care of that now. And then after looking through it and speaking again with Sergeant Ronning, we decided that the entire section on public dancing could also go because everything in there is covered somewhere else. And he informed me that in 26 years here, he has never once issued a dance permit. So we have something on the books we're not even doing. So for an actual dance, yes, we've had, they're odd. It's a funny little thing. I had a lot of fun actually researching the history of it briefly, and the dancing showed up in the 1940s, and it's just then slowly adjusted since then. At that point, 17 and younger couldn't be at a dance without a parent. And my kids need to hear this again. This doesn't mean you get to be at dances without my parents telling you. And then the Cable Communications Commission, I think we're doing very well encouraging people to watch cable television, although that's not really a thing anymore either. So it's moving away. So it's the same section, the cable the franchise agreements and things like that are all staying in, but the Communications Commission, which would be another board or committee that we'd have, is gonna be gone. So that's the only thing we're getting rid of there. So, that is your staff report.
All right, so this is the time I'm opening public testimony. Since we have nobody signed up for public testimony, I'm now going to close public testimony. Looking for recommendation from the staff?
The recommendation is to approve ordinance 2025-2938, amending Newberg Municipal Code sections 5.20, 5.25, 5.30 regarding dancing, cigarette vending machines, and the Cable Commission.
So moved.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second to approve ordinance number 2025-2938. Is there any more discussion on this issue? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Motion passes unanimously. We heard that one, Derek. All right. Enough of that. Now we have the nuisance ordinance change. So I call this legislative hearing to order. At this time, for declarations of conflicts of interest or abstentions. Does anybody have any? All right, it's time for our staff report.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, members of the City Council. Scott Siegel, Community Development Director. And before you this evening is ordinance 2025-2939. This follows a study session that the council held last month on the nuisance ordinance, the noise code and construction hours specifically. And this was initiated by staff, not requested by contractors or developers. And it was brought to our attention by actually simultaneously Community Development, Public Works, and the Police Department, code compliance had all come to the same conclusion that our construction hours were outdated and not consistent with other jurisdictions in the surrounding area. And you heard earlier this evening about the construction boom or boomlet that we're having. The construction hours, we believe, are limiting business in a way that may be harmful to the community. If these projects are not able to procure concrete, for example, or do paving work on the weekends, or receive delivery of materials outside of the hours that we currently permit, it can slow down work, it can prolong construction and have additional noise and other impacts on the community. So the ordinance would extend the existing weekday construction hours, which are 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. to Saturdays. And it would also add Sunday construction hours, albeit limited, between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. The ordinance also clarifies construction and affords the same flexibility to paving and construction of buildings that would also be available to utilities, so there's no confusion about what's permitted. You have a public hearing this evening. Staff has not received any public comments. You may open the hearing to public testimony, and I'm here to answer any questions. There are examples in the RCA of what some of our neighboring jurisdictions permit. We do believe the recommended ordinance is consistent with those best practices. And that concludes my presentation.
Well, thank you. At this time, I'm going to open public testimony. We have nobody signed up for public testimony, so I will close public testimony. Recommendation from staff?
Recommendations to move to waive the second reading and adopt ordinance 2025-2939 by title only if you so choose.
I so move.
Second.
All right. It has been moved and seconded. We approve ordinance number 2025-2939. We waive the third reading And we read the title by title only. Yeah, it was seconded, correct? Yeah. Is there any more discussion? Yeah, I was gonna ask James, do we need to read the title? Thank you.
Yeah. No worries. Ordinance 2025-2939, an ordinance amending Newberg Municipal Code, Section 8.15.150, extending permitted construction hours and clarifying construction for purposes of regulating noise.
So is there any more discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion passes unanimously. James, we did not talk about the third reading. We did read it by title only, but we didn't authorize that. Should we go back and correct that for the last public hearing?
The dancing came before, because those updates came before council previously under a separate section. So, Mr. Mayor, no, you don't need to go back.
Thank you. All right. Now, new business, proposed chapter 12 code revision on street trees. Leanne, welcome. Thank you. Good to hear from you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight, I will be presenting the proposed code maintenance to the Chapter 12 provisions relating to street tree maintenance and replacement. First, a bit of refresh on the latest discussions and actions around street trees. On July 21st of this year, City Council adopted the new approved street tree list and directed staff to prepare options for clarifying the city's street tree replacement policy. Previously, on August the 5th of 2024, Council received one public comment related to street tree replacement requirements when a tree was planted voluntarily by a property owner and not as part of an approved landscape plan. Council directed CDD staff to halt replacement of trees removed from areas not governed by an approved landscape plan until staff could address amendments that would make replacement requirements more clear. In response, staff would like to amend the code section related to tree removal and replacement in Chapter 12 of the Newberg Municipal Code to read more clearly. The intention is to require tree replacement when a landscape area of a property would become deficient of the required tree spacing as specified in NMC Chapter 15.420, which is the landscape chapter. This would mean essentially that trees planted in addition to the required spacing specified in that same code section would not need to be replaced if felled by the property owner. And as a reminder, unpermitted tree felling is an ongoing issue that we are tracking more and more recently in the field, where some folks unfortunately are cutting down trees along their entire street frontage without permit or replacement. So Officer Winters rather is helping on occasion when this is occurring, and unfortunately is affecting entire sections of neighborhoods.
Leanne, could you lean into the microphone just a
Oh.
little bit? Thank you.
Let's see. There we go. Next, I'd like to show you some of our recent mapping efforts to illustrate the urban canopy that we could potentially lose without consistency in our replacement policy. The map on the left shows the areas outside of planned landscape areas versus those governed by a landscape plan. The orange represents the areas of town not currently governed by a modern landscape plan. And the image on the right is the same map overlaid with a GIS layer of surveyed trees within city limits. As you can see, there's quite a bit of street tree canopy in the orange portions of the map representing the areas of town not governed by an improved landscape plan. These are the trees we have the potential to lose if the pause on replacement outside of landscape plan areas becomes permanent. And this next set of images is a similar mapping exercise, but breaking down the landscape plan areas into their corresponding plan types. Then again, on the right, overlaying the street tree layer to show where trees are in relation to any type of approved landscape plan areas. Moving on to the next section of code that we would like to look at, staff wishes to make clear in the criteria for street tree pruning versus removal. By specifying parameters for canopy and root pruning ensures that the tree in question has a chance at recovery. In scenarios where more than recommended quantities are required to be removed for utility clearance, the street tree should be felled so that the adjacent property owner does not inherit the dangers and expense related to the compromised tree. And this next slide shows some of these examples, some of these outcomes, and what they can look like when severe canopy pruning occurs adjacent to power lines, for example. And I know that many of us have seen trees in similar shape in the streetscape, and the effect is devastating visually and oftentimes physically for the tree. Many times this type of severe pruning will force the tree into decline due to the stress and shock of removing the tree's ability to photosynthesize as before. So with that, staff recommends taking this opportunity to revise NMC's section 12.05.260 to make it easier to follow by providing a clear progression from maintenance to pruning, then to removal and replacement, including the previous specified amendments. Alternately, council could exempt property owners from tree replacement when a tree was not part of an approved landscape plan. Although staff does not recommend this approach because of the loss of property value, aesthetic value, and ecosystem services to the community over time. And therefore, staff is requesting consideration for code amendments and reorganization of the Newberg Municipal Code Section 12.05.260, consistent with established urban forestry best practices.
Is that the entire presentation?
Mhm.
Thank you. We have one public comment, so if you would let Robert come up and have the desk. Hi, Robert. Long time no see.
Good evening. My name is Robert Suppy, local resident. I've spoken enough to you guys about this over the last year and a half, so I'm not, I would hope I don't need to repeat my previous comments, but there's a few things I do want to emphasize. There's concern from staff of loss of ecosystem services. I think you've got to look to the future, not just the past. Since this started about a year and a half ago, I've probably talked to 24 people walking around the neighborhood. Sometimes I'll see somebody planting a tree or just having planted it. And I'll say, hey, would you plant that tree if you realized you're committing yourself forever to have a tree there? They go, no big deal, it's cheap to plant a tree. I go, no. Notice you didn't have to get a permit to plant the tree. You could plant whatever tree you wanted. You didn't have to put in a root barrier. Yeah, that's cheap. But the city lets you do that. But if you cut it down, you now have to go through a permit process and you have to replace it with a tree that personally digging I think it's a good 4 or 5 foot hole, width of hole, isn't the kind of thing the everyday person's going to do. I'm certainly not going to do it. Digging a small hole to put in a tree, sure, I'll do that even at my age. So I think what you've got to look at is if people understand the code that you're trying to impose, they're not going to plant additional trees. Now, every person I talked to said they would have been very hesitant to put in a tree. You know, I didn't press them on the issue. I just wanted to know, is this a big deal? And they all said, yeah. I talked to my neighbors. We had a block party and I asked them about it. And they go, oh, you mean if I want to cut that tree down, I got to replace it with an expensive one? And I go, yeah, that's the thing. They go, I'm not excited about that. So you're relying on the fact that citizens don't know about this code. If they did, you would find fewer new trees being planted. And yeah, that's it. Basically, it's cheap to put in a tree. It's very expensive to replace it under the city code. And I just think you got to look at the burden you put on people, and you're relying on their ignorance of the code for future trees to be planted. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Oh, you go, Mr. Absolutely, go ahead.
Certainly.
So I agree with what you were saying. So just tell me, what do you think would be the right thing to do then? Because you have thought about this a lot.
Oh,
and
no,
you've-
it's what I've said before.
Yeah.
If there is no initial requirement to put in a tree, that shouldn't, the property owner should not gain a requirement for that tree because they chose on their own to put in a tree. That's a simple, I don't think that me planting a tree should have created a burden for me. And that's what the code does. So it just says, if you didn't have to put it in there when you get the permit, you suggest to staff, no, well, you don't suggest, you want to codify it, say, no, there's no requirement. Staff can encourage it, but I shouldn't have to be required to spend that kind of money because I once put in a tree. I can assure you, I would not have put in, there's 5 trees I can tell you would never have been planted if this were clearly the code, if what you're proposing were the code. I can say those with certainty, but others have indicated that. Done it? Thank you.
Yeah, are you gonna? No, yeah, I mean, I mean, I agree with that. And I think we shouldn't be doing that to somebody on down the road. I sure wouldn't want to. Plant a tree because I wanted to plant the tree and then end up, coming back and the tree is messing things up and I want to take it down. But now I got to find out, I've got to spend all this money to do it. I think we ought to not go down this road.
Hold that thought. Since this is a public hearing, the next item on the agenda is recommendation from staff.
Okay.
Again, staff recommends the council consider code amendments and reorganization of Newberg Municipal Code, section 12.05.260, consistent with established urban forestry best practices. And I can speak a little bit to clarification, just as a reminder, for Mr. For Mr. Sope's concern, we're not folks who plant in addition to the minimum spacing requirements, which is often 50 feet apart. We're not saying that they would need to replace trees in addition to that. So if they planted more than, say, their frontage might require 1 and they wanted 3 and they ended up deciding to fell 1 or 2 of those trees, that would be perfectly fine. It would be only if they became deficient.
And if I may,
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, I mean, one other aspect of this, one other dimension is that you saw the map. Those are all existing trees, and most of those are mature trees. And some of them are very large stature trees. Some of them have been chopped and hacked, and they really should come down. But the point is that people if they're moving into the community, they're buying into the community, they're buying into this tree canopy and this infrastructure that we have in the community, the pipes, the trees, everything else, the streets. So I think this is actually more about managing the inventory and the assets that you have in the community presently than it is about compelling people to plant trees. That's kind of how I look at it. But from a policy perspective, you can operate from either position. You can take the stance that, sure, this makes sense. Intuitively, if I planted a tree, why should I be compelled to replace the tree that I take out, that I get permission to take out? Or you can approach it from, these are assets in the community. They're existing. They're fairly widespread in the community. And if they're not managed in a sort of responsible way using urban forestry principles, over time it will be diminished. And that may be an acceptable outcome. We're just asking you for direction on it. It's not a public hearing, by the way. It's a work session.
So, sure, everybody has a lot to say here. We take it in order. Go ahead, please.
I appreciate all your work on this. I know this has been like a long conversation. I think what I'm uncomfortable with is just in like policy principle, what Mr. Sapi stated of that there isn't a permit requirement to plant a tree, but there are consequences to remove a tree. But your clarification of the within 50, less than 50 feet requirement does kind of satisfy some of my concern with that. I also think about trees, and to all of my progressive friends that are going to not like this, but trees and sidewalks are similar to me. Not in how we legislate, I guess, from a policy perspective. And I will just put myself on the spot. I'm always just terrified when I'm going to get a notice on my door that I have to fix the sidewalk on 2nd Street. And I couldn't afford it right now. And frankly, I don't think many people could afford having to replace a huge mature tree that has ripped up their sidewalk. And that's my concern. I do not want this to be a financial burden for the sake of a tree. I care more about the person living in the house than I do about that tree. And I think we need to consider that. And I would like us as a council, because we are maturing in our how we operate. I do think it would be a good, even like further work session to just talk about consistent policy principles of how we feel about constraints of financial burdens on homeowners and where we stand on that. Because trees are very important. I absolutely appreciate the ecosystem canopy perspective. I want that in my community. I agree that it improves home value, all of those things. But I think we need to do it from a lens. I do think that this needs to be done from a lens of an entire homeowner's responsibility, and what limitations we place or guidelines, restrictions we place on homeowners in this community, and look at it at its entirety, which is a big conversation. But I think that this is just like one piece, and I really am kind of tired of doing these like one piece things throughout the 8 years on council. And it's like, it all kind of goes together at some point. So my recommendation for this, if we need to have an answer soon, is like, I would like to keep paused the requirement to replace the tree. Didn't we do that already? That's what we're in a pause. Yeah. And I do think that this warrants more community feedback and conversation around property responsibility within city limits.
Yeah, I tend to agree with Robert and Mike, and I think Elise. It's property rights, and particularly when the tree wasn't required to be there to start with, then for the homeowner to face this expense to replace it. I don't know much about the 50 feet thing. I just don't know how many trees. I don't know how many properties have trees more frequently than 50 feet. I will tell you, I ride up and down northern Newberg every single day on my bike, and there are lots of trees planted in the meridian between the street and the sidewalk that are going to be tearing up those sidewalks. And I just don't think it's fair to the homeowner to have to pay for that replacement if they choose to take out the sidewalk repair is a whole different topic, but so I'll just leave it at that. I think people should have, I'll put property rights first, and if they want to take a tree out and not replace it, I think they should have the right to do that. And I think looking ahead to our construction coming up, all these projects, there will be trees planted, I know. So that's a good thing. So I don't think we'll lose our canopy. There may be times where it's a little thinner in some places than others, but I think over time that would correct itself.
So what if we had a statement that says, okay, if you take a tree down, you've got to replace it, but you can put a small one in there. You know, that's not very expensive. You just go get a small one where the roots are going to go straight down. They're not going to go out and end up in 20 years damaging the sidewalks or something like that. I mean, then at least you get, you know, the trees back to lining the roads, which kind of looks nice. But I don't want to put a big price tag on somebody's property by making them go out and put a great big tree back in and put the root construction thing in there to hold the roots in. I mean, that's too expensive. I wouldn't want somebody to tell me to do that, but I wouldn't mind going, okay, well, yeah, I can put a small tree in 4 or 5 feet high. It'd grow big, but have something where the roots go down where it's not going to damage the sidewalks or the street.
Counselor McBride, I do have some input in relation to the previously approved street tree list. It was designed specifically to guide adjacent property owners in the best effort to get the right tree in the right place. And I've made probably dozens of site visits at this point, visiting with our homeowners and other types of property owners. Recently, an HOA is redoing their entire streetscape. And unfortunately, originally, the specifications was the wrong tree for those narrow planters. So, you know, we worked through it, and they're going to have a much better outcome. So it's, you know, we can only improve as we go forward. And so that's staff goal, to work on something that's practical for the community in a way that makes sense for folks. And those root barriers can be helpful, but not if the wrong tree is planted in the space.
With all due respect, you are not the first member of this staff that has come up with a list of trees that are going to grow in the median and not create a problem. And yet you can't find a neighborhood that's over 10 years old that the street trees have not buckled the sidewalk in places. I did a lot of driving around this week. I drove to most of your neighborhoods. You know, the most incompliant neighborhood of any counselor here is Derrick. And that's because they have a homeowners association. And every time they take down one of those big old oak trees, they fix the sidewalk, because that's the reason they took it down. And then they plant a small oak tree. And in 20 years, how old is your neighborhood, Derrick? 20?
Yeah, it's just over 20 years.
So 20 years after they plant those, they're going to be taking them out and replanting them. And that's fine if you have a neighborhood with a homeowners association and everybody has the cash to do it. The problem I would suggest to staff is not mature trees. The problem is the desired outcome is mature trees. The problem is mature trees that were put in the wrong place. And I live on College Street. ODOT has been butchering trees on College Street for the past all summer long. There's not an ordinance that you could write that's going to make ODOT comply with that, correct?
We have to do what ODOT says. No.
So we're imposing rules on our citizens that we can't impose on our government. And then the other issue is infrastructure. Under those planning strips is also cable, electric utilities, gas, water, sewer, although those are generally in the street. But anytime that somebody wants to dig a hole in there, they have to call for a locate, and they have to find out where that is, and it becomes a more difficult task. You got to dig by hand rather than digging with a machine, which goes back to Robert's point that it's just too darn expensive. I want to go one further, and I want to ask staff to come up with an option for building houses in this city that has the sidewalks curb tight. There is no planter street. We can put the trees in the yard. And by the way, since our driveways are too short these days, when we put the driveway 10.5 feet off the street, like the current code requires, you can't legally park in your driveway because you're going to block the sidewalk. And that's an issue as well. We have many neighborhoods that have been built in the past that have curb type sidewalks. And guess what? Those are the only neighborhoods around that don't have buckling sidewalks because of trees. And a tree looks just as good in the front yard as it does on the planter strip. So I personally, I mean, if you want to continue to require street trees on new construction, that's certainly, I probably wouldn't oppose it. I would prefer to have numbers of trees placed on the lot where the builder homeowner wants them to be put instead of where the city thinks that they should be put. I really would like us to stop planting trees in the planter strip. I will, once again, I don't believe that there's a tree out there. And if we pick a tree that is going to grow in that spot, well, what's it look like? When I pick a tree for my yard, I want a tree that has the look that I want. I've got dogwoods in my front yard. They certainly are not going to work in the planter strip. So, we can put some kind of sycamore tree in the planter strip that might look good in a different state, but the reason it works here is because it doesn't grow well. Anyway, I've said enough. Thank you.
To clarify, the neighborhoods that had to have trees planted, you're suggesting now that if those are cut down to replace them, they're required to, but in other neighborhoods that aren't, like Robert, that you don't have to? That's a change, right?
Well, historically, since I've been here, it's been standard practice that in any neighborhood that someone is proposing to remove a tree, that if they're deficient of that typical tree spacing standard, that they would replace it. I understand, I wasn't the planner who facilitated Mr. Sope's tree removal permit, so am not as intimately knowledgeable, but it sounds like he had planted trees in addition, and then he wanted to remove them. So it was processed, I guess, per typical, but perhaps without their realization of the staff member that that was the case for his particular property. So that's what we were looking at, is to make sure that the code is really clear. There's a section, or a word rather, in that particular code section that says the staff may require. And so that was a bit subjective per Mr. Sope's point. And we agreed that that should be tightened up and made more clear for folks. So in essence, the idea was to tighten it up and go back to previous practice, but tied to our standards that have been in place for a long time. And in reference to these maps, we had data from 1992. And so that's the subdivision plans that we have records of. Those neighborhoods that are in the orange areas that represent areas outside of planned landscape areas are, a lot of them before 1992. Perhaps they did have street tree requirements, but we don't have the data for it. So we can't, enforce on that sort of a scenario. But there obviously was a tradition of street tree planting in those neighborhoods. So.
I think after listening to this, I think where I'm most comfortable is, it sounds like, until we had you, there were probably requirements around tree removal that were not appropriate. I'm going to say that. And requirements or our requirements on people, on homeowners. So if because 50 feet really is far. I mean, I don't know, I want to count it out because I want to know how far it is, but I am pretty comfortable with the 50 feet requirement. if that is best practice. And we have to have street trees, is my understanding, with new developments with ODOT. So I'm, the more we're talking it out loud, I'm not comfortable with requiring one standard for non-landscape plans and then one standard for another when normal people don't know what category they would fall into. And you don't know that when you buy a house. I wouldn't know that. So, correct me. I thought you
I have an idea.
So yeah, I think I'm talking myself into what you're saying. But I do think we need to get really clear that we have made errors on properties over decades in this community. And that's where I think the frustration actually lies, in the errors we've made as a city towards property owners, not necessarily that the municipal code is wrong. It's that we have interpreted it maybe much more stringently on property rights than we should have been, and that we need to actually go back to what you're doing, going out and having conversations with people and helping them through the scenarios. We don't want to be a government that's burdening.
Of course, there's two parts to this really. First of all is the simple thing of the fact that we didn't have a clear and objective code because of the unfortunate word may, right? But would it be possible perhaps that one way to get to a compromise would be to go with the sort of standard that Leanne has suggested as a good practice, but add an extra piece of text to the code that would allow a person to choose to put the tree in another location nearby?
Yeah, and I was gonna add to that, that is something that we do, that some of our new neighborhoods have really tight front yard scenarios. And in situations where the planter strip is either non-existent or very small. So we have been making contextual concessions like that. And that is something that Scott and I have discussed about putting into the code, because it makes a lot more sense to set up a tree for success in an area that they have the room to grow for whatever their genetic potential is, whether it's a small tree, a mid-sized tree, or if someone's lucky enough to have a really large front yard to put something big in. But those are the types of conversations that we are having as a staff. And, when I go out and meet with folks about their contextual scenarios, and if there are conflicting, if they've done the locates for utilities and there are constraints, then they're not required to replace in that same spot, because it would lead to the same type of failures, and that just doesn't make practical sense. So we're trying to work something that does make good sense and still give us the aesthetic value and the property value and the ecosystem services that are important for the community.
So, another issue with this is enforcement. When people cut down these trees, are we gonna start sending Neil, Officer Winters, out to each and every one of these houses that has cut a tree down in the past and make them plant trees? I live on Oxford Street. My house is old, but the rest of them had street trees, and of course, they've all buckled the sidewalks, and most of them have been removed and not replanted. So, does council wish to make a requirement that they replant trees and then enforce that on the people that didn't bother to do that? I personally don't know. I can't think of any reason why we would require a permit to remove a tree from your own yard. That I would like to see us stop. So, go ahead.
You don't need one for your own yard, right? It's just the planter strip.
Right, it's just the city-owned right-of-way.
Yeah,
It's what?
just the city-owned right-of-way. If you cut down a tree on your property, you don't need a permit for that.
Well, your street goes, or your property goes all the way to the street. You just have to let the city use part of it.
Yes, but I guess as someone who has cut down a tree on her property by herself, I know that I don't need a permit for that one. It's that planter strip that I would have needed a permit for. Sorry, Will, I had a chainsaw.
Okay.
I guess I haven't had a chance to weigh in, so I'm that girl. Sorry, y'all. I love trees. I know, I'm just gonna own myself. I love trees. I've had 3 trees cut down on my block by the city this year. And it's been a huge bummer. It's like changed the entire character of the neighborhood. All of my neighbors have made comments to me about it. I've gotten lots of visits on my street corner about the trees. So I do think that there is like good value around, and I think the 50 feet feels reasonable. I'm a big believer in property rights. I think that that's really important. So how do we support our homeowners in having full rights to their property, and then also balancing like the aesthetic and the health of the neighborhood, I think is a really judicial balance that would be good for us to think about in the context of the rest of our infrastructure as well. So to Councillor Holloman's point, the things like sidewalks, and I tripped and fell again this weekend while I was running with my dog. I'm really good at falling on our sidewalks. So I do think that we need to look at some of those things in addition to, sorry, I'm really klutzy. It's how I've always been. In addition to, but I think 50 feet feels reasonable. And I really love what you just said, that the work that you've been doing about like very contextually working with homeowners about property specific, homeowner unique. Because if something doesn't make sense, then we should address that differently. So.
I want to circle back to Robert Soapy's situation. Robert, in your case, is the tree that you took out leaving longer than a 50-foot space between trees?
Since hearing the 50-foot number, one of the notes I'm setting myself is to go measure it.
Okay.
So I don't know.
Okay, thank you.
But I would guess not. I'm sorry. This is kind of my point though, is I feel like we've gone down this rabbit hole maybe unnecessarily, and that's annoying for you. And so my feedback for you is to say that next time. I'm actually serious. You can say what you think and give us your actual recommendation as the expert, because you actually hold a degree in this. And I do think that you should flex that in this situation. And to Mr. Suppy, I do think that he was inappropriately held to the wrong standard. And I do think it almost is like we need to do a tree and sidewalk education, like Emily does great on others. And I think that that would help this situation. And I don't think that we should overcomplicate and over legislate because of the errors of staff, frankly, no one that's here. So please just tell us what you think.
I guess I have a question about the 50-foot that you specified. I'm pretty sure a lot of contractors would be really happy if they knew they only had to put them every 50 feet. I think in a lot of cases, they're required to put them a lot closer than that. And if that's not code, then that should probably stop as well.
It's different for different types of streets. In the code, it specifies between arterials and collectors, and between large canopy trees and small canopy trees. So a large canopy tree on an arterial would be 50 feet. For like a collector street with small canopy trees, it's going to be closer to 35. If that canopy of a tree is only going to get 15 to 20 feet wide, and you're spacing that out 50 feet, it's still going to look a bit sparse. But if the canopy of the tree is going to get 40 feet, then the 50 feet makes more sense. If there's room for it, there has to be room for it in the planter strip from square one, moving forward according to the new approved street tree list. So it's designed to avoid scenarios where there's going to be conflict. But I'd also say, per Councillor Yarnell Holloman's comment, just looking at other cities, especially within the Willamette Valley, every single city has basically a street tree requirement of some sort. And replacement is common. we're actually an outlier that we don't have a tree protection ordinance. Most cities do. Currently, there is no consequence if a developer is developing a commercial property that was on forested acreage. All those trees that are felled, there is no mitigation standard with a city. That is atypical. So it's part of a larger picture here. And I think we have to do what makes sense for the community. And, have these conversations, but the goal is to not do something that is impractical, that is going to result in an outcome that is undesirable.
Yeah, I mean, I know you're very passionate about this. I would like you to remember that our state is requiring densities when we build that is phenomenal. Pretty soon, you're not going to be able to get trees on lots if we keep this up. But as far as the commercial requirements for trees, I mean, they have to build their building somewhere. I would like to point to you Buckley Park. Buckley Park was built in the 80s. And at that time, there was no street tree ordinance. But the developer actually made his lots work around the mature trees that are in that neighborhood. So that neighborhood has some very nice mature trees, and it has almost every house has trees planted in the front yard. So once again, we can accomplish that and just because other cities have tree ordinances, doesn't sway me one way or the other. Will.
Can I suggest though that perhaps a good solution would be to have our planning and building division bring back some code for you guys to look at that would have some flexible sections in it to work around these tricky areas. And let's actually look at some code in that regard and see what you think.
I think that's great. Let's talk about a few of the issues and just see how council feels about it. Should we have permits to remove trees? Should a person be required? I, by the way, have removed 10 trees from my lot without buying a permit. And if you look at it today, you will not even notice it because there's still 4 more that need to come down. So how do we feel about that issue? Permits.
Well, permit within the 50 feet requirement of the street trees. I do think if it's less than 50 feet, they would need, is that what we're saying? Or they would need a permit regardless of the length between.
Well, 50 feet is only for new developments since the 90s. Anything that was built in this town prior to the 90s had no street tree requirement.
I think my stance, my comfortability is I think everyone should have to have the same rules on removal, no matter what plan they live in. I don't like permits either. If we can find a way to not have permits, I'm down, but I just think that there needs to be an equitable way of doing it across whether you live in the Greens or South Newberg.
And if I may, staff's not proposing instituting a permit process for private property. That's not what this is. This is about the trees that are in the public right of way and the street right of way. And maybe that was your question, Mayor, if there should be permits on that.
Well, no, again, my issue is trees are trees. I don't care whether they're in the yard or the right of way. They're still trees. One should be considered just like the other.
I'm just curious how many people are actually taking out permits to have trees cut down. Is this a common thing or is it like something that you rarely see?
We process tree removal permits very regularly. I'd point out perhaps there are some cities, Seattle, for instance, that does regulate trees in folks, even their backyards. They have to have a certain percentage of canopy coverage. And that is regulated. Tree permits are issued, et cetera. That's not what we're discussing. And that, in my opinion, in other places where I've practiced, that was not considered, that was considered more of an infringement on property rights to go beyond the right of way that planter strip. So that's not what staff is proposing that we regulate. It's just the trees within the public right of way.
I mean, if we did do this, I would want there to be some sort of, news, communication, letting neighbors know, because I think most neighbors don't know. I would want to do that if we decided we wanted them to have a permit, get a permit.
Your neighborhood has a lot of small dead trees in it. Yeah, that your subdivision where you live. Like I say, I went by all of your,
Are you saying, yeah, the builder planted them and they died?
and they died because the homeowner's not watering them properly.
Well,
but-
they were on the other side of the fence where they wouldn't even
On
think to
the,
take.
on the right of way, not in the front yard of the neighbor.
Yeah,
Right.
behind their
Well-
property, which is another issue.
There are many advantages to having a permit and not just a fiscal advantage. There are advantages to having a permit for trees in the public right of way. Specifically, it lets staff have some visibility on the type of tree, the species, its structure, where it's going, whether there is a problem with infrastructure that's in the GIS layer, and our streets, our sweepers have to go near there, delivery trucks need to go through there. The wrong tree can cause big problems. So the purpose of the permit is to make sure that the right tree, the right place, that's why there's a permit. It's, yeah.
So in your neighborhood, there aren't any trees in the public right of way. So if we passed an ordinance requiring them, would you be willing to put 2 trees in your public right of way of the type and size that staff says need to be in there?
Yes. And let me tell you my sad tree story since you've asked me directly. My wife and I tried to plant an oak tree in our front yard near the footpath, near the sidewalk. And we must be tree idiots because the sapling died, which was pretty saddening because we went out, we watered it every day, we did all these other things and it didn't work.
You wouldn't have wanted that in 30 years. That would have tore up.
Well, it was right in the middle of the yard. It was right in the middle of the yard. It would have been okay, I think. But the point is, yes, I would be willing to do that to make up my tree deficiency, which I have inherited.
In addition to the new tree list, were we requiring the root barrier? Were we requiring that still?
That's been standard and in place since way before I got here.
Do you remember the price on that?
I haven't priced root barriers recently, just that piece of it. There's lots to choose from.
What Robert does. Could I ask Robert? Sure. What his quote was? I remember it was a very high amount.
No, that's two
I have a lot
trees
to put on
sound
home.
more, that price for 2 trees sounds more accurate.
Yes.
Can I recommend that we allow the team time to now take our thoughts? And I think all of us are saying we want flexibility in the code with the discretion of staff to support the neighbor that's going through the situation. But I think
So shall we table this until a future meeting? How far out do you think that we want to think about this before we come back?
6 months.
That was Mike.
I will defer to my experts.
Well, I guess we're asking them not to take any further action at this point until we've had a chance to have another work session on this. Is that what you're saying?
well, I think that didn't city manager propose like the modification to the code language for flexibility?
I think in terms of the code itself, first of all, there has been a drive from our whole world of planning for clear and objective standards in our development code. Therefore, we have to address the word may. But at the same time, to help people who might be on a tight budget, who maybe can't afford an inordinately expensive tree barrier, they might have some variant code options to shift the tree to a better location in a yard or in a case where there's infrastructure in the way, or if they want the perfect look to it, and they might keep it in the planter strip and add those extra features. But the net effect is we get to preserve our trees near sidewalks if we have good code, and and then the street sweeper won't hit an unregulated tree.
I think that's great. I would like to remind staff that right here on First Street in Newberg, almost every tree that this city has planted on First Street is mature, past its life, useful life, needs to be replaced, and we don't want to do it because we don't have the money to do them all at once. That's, we have a lot more money than our citizens do. So anyway, that is the last item on our agenda.
Well, what about Jerry's trees? Who's gonna replace those?
Whose? Oh, Jerry's trees?
She's gonna have to.
Can I just, when we remove a tree as the city, what is the standard? I mean, that is kind of messed up to remove some trees and not replant them.
Sorry, Will.
We have a fantastic tree manual right now, suitable to the climate, with perfect graphic design, with heights and canopy size described. From that perfect manuscript, I'm certain that people can get the right tree for the right location.
But who pays for it?
And I'll come over to the councillor's house with a shovel, and I will help dig a hole if so required, as a volunteer, not as part of my duties. If I'm going to paint wine barrels with undergraduates who kept looking at their phones all the time, I don't mind coming and digging a hole for a tree.
Allison just called and she said, Will, you will do no such thing. So if it's all right with the council, I'd like to go ahead and adjourn this meeting. Meeting's adjourned.
Mr. Mayor, we have an exec session as well.
Oh, that's right.
We have an exec session today.
So this meeting is unadjourned. I don't have the script for the executive session.
It should be
Oh, is it
here,
here?
and we are not planning on coming back, so you can, we're
We have
adjourning.
to come back and close. That's the rule. That's the requirement. They have to come back and close the meeting out.
Oh, that's not how I read it, but that's okay. We can do it anyways.
Hey, Rachel?
All right. All right. I will now read the announcement required to hold an executive session. After the announcement, this Zoom meeting will close and the council will move to a separate meeting room not open to the public. Once we've concluded the executive portion of this meeting, the Zoom meeting will be opened again and we will resume our open meeting. The city council will now meet in executive session for the purpose of considering information or records that are exempt by law from public inspection. The executive session is held pursuant to ORS 192.6602A. A representative of the news media, this designated staff and other persons will be allowed to attend the executive session. No decision will be made in the executive session. At the end of the section, the council will return to open session, rejoin open session Zoom link. We will now terminate the public Zoom meeting and begin the executive session.